Greetings, and welcome to another episode of the Astartes Anonymous podcast, where, today, I'm joined by two exceptional guests, my good friend Alex, also known as the Gaming Storyteller, and the ever-passionate homebrewer Zarrek. Zarrek and I are deeply immersed in the world of homebrewing, while Alex brings his wealth of knowledge on the vast and intricate lore of Warhammer 40k. So, together, we'll be diving into some of the most common pitfalls when crafting a custom Space Marine chapter. So, join us in exploring some of the, common blunders? Blommen kunders. God, that sounds so bad. Of homebrewing Warhammer 40k Space Marine chapters. I'm your host Tom, and these are my co-hosts.
Hi, I am Alex, and I love cheese.
Hi, I'm Zarrek, and I'm currently drowning in sprues.
Oh, God.
Blommen kunders. That sounds so wrong.
I don't like it. Stop saying it.
It reminds me of the Burger Big Beast Sugar.
It sounds moldy, doesn't it?
Moldy. Yeah. Oh.
It just sounds like chunder.
But somehow worse, you know. You can
Chunder warrior.
You could forgive someone for chundering, but you couldn't forgive someone for cundering. You know.
No. Local slang. There's an obscure Scottish word in a particular city. I don't want to dox myself, but there's an obscure word in my locality called cundy.
Cundy.
It means sink drain.
Sink drain. So, what would cundering be?
YouTube, please don't demonetize us.
I feel like it's somewhere. It's like, I feel like it sounds. I don't know if it's just me, but it sounds like conjuring. So it's like if you're conjuring, you're summoning something from the sink drain, perhaps.
It's when your sink gets backed up.
Your sink gets the sink is conjuring. Oh, okay. All right, we'll work out what blommen means next time then. Mm-hmm. Blommen conjuring, everybody. A new phrase for your dictionary. So, shall we take a look at our models of the week?
Yes, sir.
So we're going to start this time with Zarrek's, because Zarrek, you haven't had the opportunity to choose a model of the week so far because we've been doing our silly little Tech Priest roleplay. So, would you like to tell us a little bit who this is by and a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So this homebrew is by Dangerous Cows. This is a mechanically themed Thousand Suns army, which I love. Iron Hands and Thousand Suns player here. And in particular, I really like this, I guess, half tech marine, half librarian.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's pink is always good. Tom, I think you'll agree. That shade of pink is excellent.
I think we got some Doomfire magenta going on here.
Oh, hell yeah.
But that pose in particular, and the way he's holding that staff, remind me viscerally of the original Firstborn Librarian from around about 5th to 7th.
Yeah.
And I love that model. I think my first Space Marine character was that model. And I have a deep adoration for anything that reminds me of it.
No, having the weapon being so obtusely posed in front of the model is a very old Hammer style of posing.
Yeah.
I've just noticed the little energy sort of thing on his shoulder, and you can sort of see it on the Marines behind him as well. The little pink energy pulsing.
Yeah, it's coming up his leg, up to his hand
yes,
as well.
his leg as well, yeah.
It's really nice, really subtle. And like that shoulder pad on the right there, well, his left, is from the 40k Thousand Suns kit, which is a very nice, subtle detail.
I have to say, the first thing when I saw him in the back of my mind, I just had the phrase, "You shall not pass" in the pose he's standing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have to say, just the whole idea of an Electro Priest like librarian is incredibly cool.
Yeah.
It's such a cool model, and I think those are also Electro Priest parts on like his gauntlets and its shoulder pad. Looks amazing.
Yeah.
Great job.
The giant cog sort of for an iron halo. And I know it's meant to be just a mechanical Thousand Suns, but we can't ignore the Iron Warrior sort of inspiration and theming that's come with these as well. No, it looks really, really good. Right, let's move on to our next model of the week. And this one was chosen by Alex. And I've just clicked on the link for your last week's model. Let's not show off that Dreadnought again. And this one was chosen by Alex. So, Alex, would you like to tell us who and what this is?
So this is a nullifactor done by the Snizzy. Apparently he's been on the podcast before with some of his models.
Yes.
And I have to say, I just had to do a double take when I saw this first. He's got the grimdark teaming going on with all the edges. Instead of being highlighted, he's doing the reverse thing. There's battle damage on every single edge, giving a very grimdark feel.
Yeah.
He's got these beautiful little, like, runes all over the armor, like painted with little white lines. And it looks so good. Of course, then with a nice snowy base to set off against a cold armor, and then some red glowy weaponry. It looks such a good paint job. I love it.
Yeah. This is, if I recall correctly, part of a larger force that Snizzy has done that are... I'm so sorry, Snizzy. I've just, if you're listening to this, I've just gone looking for the message you sent me and I can't find it. So I'm going to pretend I remember what you said. And it was something along the lines of being a Black Shield force for his Horus Heresy homebrew of Witch Hunters, I believe. Which is this is very cool because this is his Terminator color scheme. You can see how it's blue with those cold white sort of runic patterns across it. Whereas in his normal color scheme, for non-Terminators, it's actually more of a deep bloody red color, like a Wordbearer's color, with some of this cold blue with the runic patterns on a few panels instead. It looks really, really nice. No, excellent job there, Snizzy. Wonderful stuff.
God, those chains as well.
Yeah.
They're so lovely. They just fall on the weapon.
It's very seamless, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful sort of example of using Chaos Space Marine bits for a Loyalist force, which is fun because the other way around is done very, very commonly. Because it's very easy to apply Loyalist Space Marine parts to Chaos Space Marines and make them work with either a paint job or a few bits here and there. Much harder to do the inverse, and he's done it very, very well here. So yeah, excellent job, Snizzy. Right, moving on to the last model of the week. And this one was chosen by me. And this is by a user called 42NE. I think it's meant to be pronounced Fortune.
Fortune?
Fortune. And this is a champion of his, I believe it's his homebrew chapter called the Brazen Lords. And the fun thing about this homebrew chapter, the Brazen Lords, is their color scheme is really interesting because you'll have noticed quite quickly that it's kind of two canon Dark Angel schemes folded into one. It's not only the Heresy era Dark Angels black and red, but because he's almost edge highlighted it, the trim with silver, you could argue that the color is a very dark metal, and that would mean that the color scheme is just like the Guardians of the Covenant, which are a very prominent Dark Angel successor chapter in canon. So it's a really lovely sort of mix between the two. And we got on the base there is a Mark 6 Marine with a Mark 7 helmet. I believe that's the Mark 6 set of legs or torso. I could be wrong.
Looks about it. It might be the Mark 7 Assault Marines, the one with the
Oh no,
bare
you're
chest.
right. I think you're right. Yeah. No, it's just a wonderful, wonderful job. It's a kitbash using the Inner Circle Companions kit, sword on the back. He's gotten rid of the big Dark Angels banner and put a giant heretic beating incense stick on the end. No, exceptional job. Wonderful job for a champion.
Yeah.
Great little model. I love the base work. The base is subtle, super powerful.
I love the muted scheme on this model.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
yeah. It's such a great idea to use black, but then to edge highlight the black with another color, right? Not just edge highlighting it with gray or edge highlighting it with blue, but using metallic.
Playing into your silvers and stuff, it looks so good. And also the reds themselves, they're a very desaturated base red, but with some slightly brighter red highlights on that. It creates a very muted, just very... It almost looks bouncy, but the longer you look at it, the more beautiful it becomes and the more it pulls together.
Yeah, a very, very
job.
creative model. I bet this has got some wonderful board presence. Even the base oversteps the basing oversteps the base a little bit as well, which is a nice little touch. Again, giving it more and more board presence. Yeah, wonderful job, Fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything based on a Blade Guard Ancient is going to be fantastic.
Oh, it is the Blade Guard Ancient body. Oh my goodness, that took me a moment there. Yes, I forgot. Sorry, it's just, I get so worked up thinking of how the Inner Circle Companions are so heavily robed. I was looking at it thinking it was an Inner Circle Companions body. You're right.
I think that's where the sword's from.
That is where the sword's from. That is where the sword's from. The hood as well. The hood and the helmet as well. Oh, just all of the Dark Angel stuff with the robes and the sword and the hood and the incense. Great job. Wonderful stuff, Fortune. So that is it for our models of the week. Great job, you three. Fortune, Snizzy, and Dangerous Cows. Excellent job, you three. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very, very fun and almost dear episode to go over today. As you all know, homebrewing in the AA Discord and amongst the different members of the AA team and the extended AA team homebrewing is a very important thing to us. We love homebrewing. And we love homebrewing Space Marines, right? That's the big one. You get into 40k, you want to make your own Space Marines, boom, you're homebrewing Space Marines. Whether it's just a color scheme or a character or the whole lore, that's what you're getting into. It's what a lot of people are getting into now, aren't they? With Space Marine 2 and new people coming into the hobby. I mean, could you believe it? Space Marine 2 has stopped Deathwatch from dying. So, you got loads of people coming into the hobby now wanting to do their own Space Marines, which is awesome. So,
and we've seen the birth of a brilliant homebrew chapter. Honestly, one of my favorites, the Crayon Eaters.
The Crayon Eaters chapter, yes.
Oh, yes.
It's got to be up there.
Of course.
You've all seen one. I promise. Even if you didn't know, you've seen one.
And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because you got people coming in. I mean, I've noticed it as well because when someone comes into the AA Discord, right, and they ask questions about homebrewing, usually within them asking one or two questions, you can kind of gauge where they're at on their sort of homebrewing journey, how fresh they are. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks since Space Marine 2, there has been a lot of people coming in asking those very fresh questions, right? Questions that are like, oh, you're right at the beginning of your sort of journey here. Okay, cool. Let's see what we can do. So, to that end, we today wanted to talk about some of the common blunders people make when they're doing homebrewing Space Marines. This list, if you will, is going to be with a bit of a law compliance focus. So, I'd like to give you all a disclaimer before we dive into the details. I want to empathize. I'd like to empathize that at the core of 40k, this is a hobby meant to be enjoyed. The universe is vast, full of endless possibilities for creativity and personal expression. While staying true to the established lore can enhance the immersion and the connection to the universe, it's important to remember that having fun with your creations and enjoying the process of building your own narratives is what matters the most. Yeah? Perfection or strict adherence to the lore is secondary to your own enjoyment. So, any feedback or discussion about potential mistakes or inconsistencies is meant to help you refine and enhance your vision, not limit it. After all, your Space Marines are your Space Marines. And as always, if you disagree with something we mention here, and to you that something curtails your enjoyment of the hobby, then ignore it. In the end, we're just homebrew enthusiasts with opinions. Nothing we say is gospel. Please prioritize your own enjoyment.
Absolutely, and I think of all the topics we're about to discuss, I'm pretty sure GW has broken every single one of them at some point.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
I think one of the things I've written down, I've got some notes for later on, is about how you shouldn't always trust GW for lore, which is terrible because they're the only source of it. But when you've got 500 odd books in a setting, you cannot trust all of them to be any good. You really can't.
Unreliable narrator only goes so far.
I'm afraid so. So, with that being said, should we have a look at our first point to go over? So,
Yes,
1 to 20. So, number 1 is inconsistency with the established lore. So, contradicting canon. One of the most common mistakes is introducing ideas or events that directly contradict existing lore. Warhammer 40k's universe is, as we mentioned, vast. It follows specific rules and timelines and histories, and deviating from these without justification can really create some glaring inconsistencies. Or things like ignoring faction traits, characters or factions behaving in ways that are contrary to their established traits, e.g. a Khorne Berserker being diplomatic, or an Orc meticulously planning a battle. These sorts of things really undermine the immersion in the 40k setting.
Yeah, when it comes to homebrewing and deciding what your characters or your faction is capable of that you're creating, the main thing to immediately take into consideration when it comes to that, right? Let's say Mr. Ultramarine 101 came by and saw this happen. How would he respond to your chapter only existing out of only dreadnoughts?
Yeah.
That wouldn't really work on the base lore sense, and it would be more unwieldable and sitting more in the way of making a very good chapter and writing a very good lore piece than actually helping it. Of course, your chapter may have 100 dreadnoughts. They're really lucky in their production. Maybe they have a forge near them.
Yeah.
But then going along the way and saying every single marine is a dreadnought and I just have a bunch of Mechanicus priests with them is unbelievable. Because in the end, we all know the Mechanicus would take control. That chapter would never be seen again.
Yeah, they'd disappear into someone's forge world. And be used as experiments for the next 10,000 years.
Yeah, by ignoring some base set rules that every faction is bound to, you are going to take away from the value that all the cool parts you will write.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't get there in the first place anyway, and that'd be honestly a shame of that. So when making your, like, starting out your faction, like designing the idea, writing down your first paper, consider, like, how would other factions in the setting respond to that? And is that within reason? Do we have examples of this? Or at least something similar enough? Because it can get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, as part of that, you shouldn't ignore the established faction traits, but there is a way to work past them. Like Tom was saying, for example, if you wanted to have an orc that was meticulous in his planning, you'd really have to consider, what does that mean on a personal and level? What kind level? Of... Well, yeah, that's the scale. I know my orc terminology, but if I understand it correctly, orcs generally split into two lots. You got the main bunch, and you've got the odd boys, and those are the ones that don't immediately run in and get themselves killed, and everyone thinks they're odd because they don't want to go and die in a scrap. So whenever an odd boy grows to power, for example, like a Mad Doc or something, you need a good reason for that, and they've got to be interesting. But really, that's just even more stuff to work with for creating something cool and new and interesting.
Yeah, and I think with a focus on Space Marines too, you do kind of have to take a look at what is given to you as examples. I mean, one of the points I've got later on sort of touches on this, right? And it's, don't rely on examples too heavily, but do rely on them. Don't take things too far afield, because one of the things that I actually haven't put it on this list anywhere, at least I don't think I have, is how dark and gothic 40k is, right?
Yeah.
If you're writing your homebrew and you write something about your chapter master, do ask yourself, is this particularly dark and gothic? Dark and gothic doesn't need to be, he drinks the blood of children or stuff like that. But there are things that are clearly not particularly dark and gothic. For example, if you read up on the Raptors chapter, for example, GW has done a very good job, at least historically, of still making that chapter come off as very gothic, very applying to the setting, whilst also keeping their very practical, pragmatic nature. The Ultramarines are another great example of this. We all think of the Ultramarines as the very clean poster boys who are very utilitarian. But again, GW has, for the most part, done a really good job at keeping them somewhat gothic. Although I will say the Primaris era has upheaved that a little. I wouldn't say it's been upheaved beyond the point of forgiveness. So it
was a little changed up, but it's still there. They're bringing it back again. There was a period of time where they needed some hope for a reason to explore them, and then once that hope kind of died out recently, it's we're right back in place. It's the grim dark universe after all.
But I think what I really want to say about this point, which is point number one, inconsistency with established lore. This is a really good one for setting up, when you're setting up the timeline of your homebrew chapter, right? When you're founding their history, when you're creating their history, because certain things happened, right? You've got 13 Black Crusades, you've got 100 Forge Worlds, you've got all these Fortress Worlds, you've got the Cicatrix Maledictum, and before that we had the Maelstrom and the Eye of Terror, right? These are things, and these things all had beginnings, and you've kind of got to work out where your shit kind of happened in relation to that. And you don't really want to say that, my chapter was at the Fall of Cadia, for example. See, this is a really fun one because I have wanted to have a homebrew chapter one of my homebrew chapters be relevant to the Fall of Cadia for a really long time, because I know that their homeworld isn't particularly far away from there. But on the other hand, there is also the Fall of Cadia, Tom, is really fucking important in the grand narrative. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to justify that without being inconsistent to the established lore? And the answer I've always fallen in is I don't think I'm going to, because the last thing I want to do is create a very contrived workaround to justify being in the place of something very important and grandiose. I don't want to do that.
It is actually a case of like show rather than tell. If you're unsure, have a really cool art piece made.
Yeah.
Don't tell the story as to why they're there.
That's a fun one. Yeah. Artwork is so huge. I mean, this is kind of off topic already. We can't do an AA episode without being off topic. But artwork is a huge one. Not everyone can afford big fancy 40k art commissions though. But if you do get to a point where you can and you want to do something special, that's a good way of handling it. Right. Shall we move on to the second point, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, sir. Let's get it.
So, point number 2. Overpowered characters or factions. Gary Stu Space Marines. Creating characters who are too perfect, invincible, or who excel in every situation without flaw or weakness. Or worse, only superficial flaws and weaknesses makes them unengaging. This is the same reason why some people are really starting to dislike Marneus Calgar, as the Blueberry has ascended to meme status.
He has become John Warhammer.
He has. I mean, I won't lie. Spoilers for Space Marine 2 in the next 5 seconds, so jump out if you still haven't played it and the story you've kept away from the story somehow. Tune back in like a minute. I'll be off this point. But his entry in that one cutscene was really awesome. It was badass. And I say a lot of 40k does sort of live and die by overpowered characters, yada, yada, yada. But there's a difference when that character has been an established character in canon for the last, 35 years versus your homebrew character. Your homebrew character is not Grimaldus. Your homebrew character is not Halbrecht. Your homebrew character is not Marneus Calgar. Now, your character can be cool as fuck. Your faction can be cool as fuck. But there are things that are kept special because they are rare and they are one-of-a-kind things that GW likes to pull out on the occasion, right? Marneus Calgar is the best and worst example of that.
Yeah, it is a case of like try not to copy the characters that you really like that already exist, because you will, in the end, it will kind of just end up in a copy of that other character, making both that character a little less special for you. And for other people to be like, well, but that's just Grimaldus 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, do be inspired, though. Be inspired. Do be inspired by, but yeah, do tread carefully. Tread carefully, because it's, I mean, again, I mentioned this in one of the other points later on, and I'll mention it now, really early on. But this is actually a good time to sort of segue into it. Mm-hmm. What is the one thing from a homebrew standpoint, a homebrew would look at the Black Templars and see and say that is special? Come on, I know you two both know the answer. What is special about the Black...
Numbers.
Numbers.
It's numbers. They're fucking massive.
It is numbers.
Yeah.
It is numbers. The Black Templars are fucking colossal. They're huge. Their chapter is enormous. They've been on a permanent crusade for the best part of the last 10,000 years. And what some people will do is they'll come into homebrewing and they'll go, yeah, I'm just like the Black Templars. So my chapter is non-codex compliant, and I've got... I'm mocking. I shouldn't be mocking, but I am. It's non-codex compliant, and we've got loads of excess Space Marines. Now, I don't want to argue about whether 1,000 Marines is enough or isn't enough, because there's a good argument for either way. But whilst we're dealing with established canon, one of the things that makes the Black Templars so special is that they bypass that rule. That's one of the things that makes them special. That's their overpowered trait, beyond having some really great religiously zealous characters. I don't think I put a point in here along the lines of respect established things, but that's one of the ways in which you would do that, right?
Well, to be fair, with Black Templars, one of the big reasons that they get away with their huge numbers is for an in-lore reason, and that is the exemption for chapters on Crusade.
Yep.
It's a a rule that they get to break in the setting, and having that written in isn't something that you're going to be able to get away with for any old homebrew.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to have an exception, it needs to be one that makes sense off the back of lore that already exists, not just an exception that you write in, like to add on to the many like samples of the Codex Astartes or something.
I mean, I mentioned the same point later in my notes that you've just brought up. But one of the other reasons as well, whilst we're on the point of the Black Templars, it's really important, is the Black Templars have been around and doing exactly that for the best part of 10,000 years. The Imperium actually could not suppress the Black Templars if they wanted to. And if they tried, it would be Badab all over again, but worse. It would be monumental. So they've gotten to a point where even if the Imperium and the Inquisition turned up and was like, yo, you guys need to be made smaller, and Helbrick turns around and goes, nuh-uh, there's not actually anything they can do about it. Because again, that time frame has been going on. And let's say you wanted to homebrew that. Let's say you wanted to homebrew a second founding successor chapter with that same ethos. You've now got to write 10,000 years worth of lore and explain why your chapter hasn't been present in any of the major events in that time, but has still somehow grown to the same scale as the Black Templars, all somehow without writing anything to degrade or devalue the Black Templars.
Actually, talking about the Badab War, the best example of what happens if a Space Marine chapter gets a little too excited, even a well-respected chapter goes over 1,000, what starts happening? The Imperium gets real mad with you. Just the main reason that they don't really dare to do anything with the Black Templars. Also, they are the example of religion within the Imperium, which is their most powerful tool. The Astar Claws were just any other chapter, well-respected and well-loved. They went a little overboard. And look how they ended up. And there's a whole plethora of points we could break into here, which we're not gonna, but there's a whole plethora of points we could break into here about renegade chapters and falling to chaos and how that sort of the establishment works, and it's all very interesting. But I think that the real takeaway here is that there are certain, coming back to the point, which is overpowered characters or factions, which we still actually have some stuff to talk about. But when it comes the faction side,
but when it comes to established factions that are overpowered, most of them are that way for a very special reason. No one is going to tell me that the Black Templars are not one of the most special Space Marine chapters in the setting. That you've seen that as soon as you see that John Blanche 3rd edition cover art, you know, you don't think twice. You know they're special. But moving on to overpowered characters, Gary Stu Space Marines, right? Forgetting Marnius Calgar for a minute.
We've all seen one. We've all seen a friend write one. We've all written
one. Actually, that's a really great start, Zarrek. That's a really great start, and I'll tell you why. Because you should write one. You should write one or two. And I'll tell you why. Because at some point in your homebrewing journey, you're going to write an extremely overpowered Space Marine. Someone like, you've got a guy in the server called Aragon. He'll show up and he'll tell you your character is something. He'll say he's a Gary Stu in different phrasing, right? He'll find a long-winded way of telling you that your Space Marine is just this sort of anime OC character, right? You should still write that character, and I'll tell you why. Because you're going to take that criticism you're going to get from more experienced homebrewers, and you're going to reel him in. You're going to tone him down, and you're going to find a place where you've got your chapter champion, who's now really powerful, but he's within the boundaries of the lore. And he's still really special, because you made him special from the get-go. You've just brought him in, you've just reeled him in, and you've started to balance him out as this really special character, right? You should make an anime OC Space Marine at some point or another. You absolutely should. Just take the criticism, understand that it's not the final draft, understand that your first draft is only ever a first draft, right? And this is applying to all homebrewing and all fan fiction across all settings. It has to. It's all writing. A first draft is just a first draft.
Yep.
But that first draft with that really overpowered character, don't deny yourself that. It's a lot of fun. Just always understand it's a first draft. That's what I would say. You know, it's a bit shit when you propose that first draft as if it's your final draft to your peers, and they've got their homebrew stuff, and you show it to them, and you go, hey, here's, Sergeant Major Biggest Bongus, right? The chapter champion of the, Star Platinum chapter. And he's a psycho who summons a magical version of himself to fight people for him or some shit. It's cool.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome, but then it's like we come back to our first point about consistency with the established lore. And it's like, well, I'm not going to name any names, actually. I'm not going to. I want to, but I'm not going to. There's a guy I know who is working on a homebrew character. Not a chapter, a character. It's a very interesting character. The artwork's amazing. But he's had his character go toe-to-toe with Karl the Betrayer and live. Zarrek knows what I'm talking about. A couple of you listening might know who I'm talking about as well. He's had his character go toe-to-toe with Karl the Betrayer and Gazgul and a number of other huge big-name characters, and not only live, but really do well in these fights. And it's like, you are aware that you're degrading Karl the Betrayer. Like, you're making Karl the Betrayer, who is the most beloved. He is the World Eater. He is the World Eater, right? He is he is the antithesis of Sigismund. He's the man.
He's Mr. Corn.
He is Mr. Corn Incorporated. Absolutely. And it's like, it's a little bit, and this comes back to, again, it's a point that I haven't made, but it's an overarching point throughout all of this. Really try to respect the established lore. And one of the best ways to do that is to just play it safe with your points of comparison. If you want to show that your character's overpowered, again, like Alex said before, show, don't tell. Show him doing something amazing, but you don't have to tell people that he did it by lifting up a Necron pylon or taking the head off of a Khorne Lord of Skulls with his bare hands, or defeating Khan in one-on-one combat.
No, you wouldn't understand, Tom. He's built different.
Marmius Calgar is built different. Anyways, ladies and gents, should we move on to the next point?
Well, there's one more thing I'd like to say.
Oh, please, by all means.
So I think, genuinely, one of the best and most fun things you can do with your homebrew is explain a time that they got the snot beaten out of them and why.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's so much fun because it's your guys. They can eat as much shit as you want them to, as much as you can stomach, and you can make it really cool. Why do you think that the Fall of Hell's Reach was as cool as it was? It's because they all fucking died. That's cool. If you want a cool character, have him barely survive that. Write your own Fall of Hell's Reach. Write something horrible and apocalyptic that has real consequence for the chapter and gives someone reason to keep on fighting and to hate even more.
It's absolutely. It is the diamond narrative fuel. It's incredibly fun to do that as well. I mean, what you could do, actually, and I mentioned this before on a video, you could take that one step further. You could kill your homebrew. I've done it. It's fun. I've done it. No, I worked on a homebrew for 18 months. I loved them. I still love them. They're all dead. It was one of the most fun writing experiences I had. It's great. Just kill your homebrew. I'm not saying I'm not saying you have to, but if you get to a point where, like, it was for me, it was an early-ish homebrew, and there was a lot wrong with them. There was a lot that by the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 20th draft, right? I still couldn't quite compromise with them. I couldn't quite get them where I wanted. And so I thought, fuck it. Let's get rid of them. But let's have fun with it, because I still have a lot of attachment to them, right? And so now...
I did that with one of my original chapters as well. I can't say the word on YouTube, but they fell to malice and they committed suicide.
Suicide,
Yeah.
I mean, well, this is the thing as well, right?
That's the way it is.
They can still live on in other ways, right? Because I've got other homebrews. My friends have homebrews. I've got friends who've got homebrews who mention in their records, in their chapters records, fighting alongside this other chapter. And they can still live on in these little ways, and it's fun and it's interesting. And like Zarrek said, it's a narrative joy to let go of the chains of forcing your characters to win or even be alive. It's a real treat to kill them all, or some of them, or And if you take it to a character level, a character losing a battle, or losing an arm or a leg, or becoming interred, working on a character for a year, and then going, you know what, it's Dreadnought time, and having him lose a battle horrendously, his whole company dies, and he lone survivor, and he's missing all his limbs, and it's just terrible, but now you've got a great Dreadnought. Now you've got the best Dreadnought, and you know why he's the best? He's the best because you've spent a year working on him before you put him in the box.
I love that.
Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to point number 3. This one is a little bit connected to point number 1, and I've got a fair bit to say before we go back and forth, but I'll just try and get through it quickly. So, point number 3. Unjustified Divergence, and McGuffin status. So, the lack of explanation for unique features, right? When homebrew factions or characters diverge from the established norm, there must be a clear, in-law explanation. Simply introducing something drastically different without tying it to the universe's broader history, politics, or constraints makes that creation feel disconnected, right? Or radical new technologies, or actually, here's a fun one, mutations, right? Introducing new technology or mutations not present in the established lore, e.g. a new form of superweapon or psychic power without credible background or explanation can come across as, well, outlandish, and ignoring genetic legacy. Space Marine chapters derive from specific Primarchs, and unless your Primarch is going to go unknown, they're going to inherit traits or flaws, like the Red Thirst. You can't make a Blood Angel successor and ignore the Red Thirst. Remember, actually, here's a fun one. I'll just go off on a tangent before I finish this. The Blood Angels will always be the base level for how the Red Thirst is, right? You can make the Red Thirst with your chapter worse, but never better than what the Blood Angels are at, right? That will always be a narrative fixed point. So just keep that one, in mind. And actually, here's another really good one that I really wanted to mention, because this one is, when we talk about people making homebrews, right, and making homebrew mistakes, especially for Space Marines, this is the one that comes up the most. This is you're listening to this now. And again, I'm not your dad. You can do whatever you want with homebrewing. Homebrew to your heart's content. Have fun. Like the disclaimer we said at the start, just prioritize your enjoyment. That being said, cursed founding chapters with positive upsides and entirely superficial downsides. For example, Marines that have mutated, hyper-advanced vision that borders on the preternatural, but their downside is, their eyes glow, right? There's so many chapters, homebrew chapters that I've seen where someone has basically said, my chapter is basically, they're like Wolverine, where they've got like incredible healing well beyond that of a Space Marine, and they've got bone claws, and what's their downside? They're smelly. Or what's their downside? They just look they've got something visually wrong with them. Like, the Cursed Founding chapters are actually properly cursed. They're really cursed. They almost all of them have really severe problems. A good chunk of which have actually just been straight up killed off by the Inquisition or the Imperium at large. Take the, what's it called? The Gorgons? The Blood Gorgons? They just straight up fell to their mutation was, we're falling to chaos. That was their shtick. Or the Flame Falcons. Is it the Flame Falcons? Yeah, it was the Flame Falcons. They literally burst into flame on the battlefield. And the Inquisition saw it once and went, no, you guys are gone. And they sent the Grey Knights after them. Cursed Foundings, that word cursed. When you think of cursed in a meme sense, right, you think of an image that's been super deep fried and has been like a re-uploaded JPEG like several times. Think about that for your chapters. That's how cursed they are. They're a JPEG that's gone through the ringer at least 200 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're downstairs looking for beans at 3 a.m. Yeah. What kind of fiend does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
But like you were saying, Tom, it's really easy to take one of those, say, upsided results and to fix it if you wanna take it that way. For example, that like preternatural sight. That's cool. That's a great strength for a chapter to have. That's a cool gimmick. But for the curse, they see dead people.
They see dead people.
There you go.
Oh, God.
They see dead people. And sometimes maybe they can't tell the dead from the living.
And that
could be terrifying.
It causes practical problems as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forget the Chaos Warband that this happened to, but there was this story within 40k that the Space Marine chapter asked for foresight. And they did indeed get foresight in certain abilities, but in return, they heard every single lie being told at all times in their head, 24/7, even while asleep. So the thing is, even in setting, all little positives are usually offset with pretty big negatives. So keep that in mind.
It's like if you press the button, you get $1 million. But you grow a new tongue and it's in your butthole. It's like the downside has to be a practical thing that causes them problems in their, not just some quirk that's like, again, we've got to be careful with that anime OC thing here, right? You got to really keep your eye on the ball, You don't want their downside to be this superficial thing that just gives them pixie girl quirkiness status. You really don't want that. you know. And I mentioned at the start, point number 3 is Unjustified, Divergence, and McGuffin status. We actually almost already covered this with the Black Templars, but I'll read out my notes anyway, because I think it's really important that we go over this, because it's not just the Black Templars, but it's other things as well, right? In fact, actually, I can just read the first part, because the second part was our conversation about the Black Templars, and that's that a chapter does something that any other chapter would be annihilated for, but gets away with it because they are beloved by the Inquisition, or an Inquisitor, or some other imperial body. It really rustles my jim jams when I'll sit there and I'll read a homebrew. So I've read a lot of homebrews, guys. I've read a lot of homebrews. And I'm like, wow, this homebrew is amazing. I'm really, really enjoying this. We combine these last 2 points, right? This cursed founding shit, right? I'll read it. And this has happened. I can think of maybe 4 homebrews in the last 6 months I've read that have had this, which are really good homebrews. It's like, this is great. I'm loving this. And it's like, here's their mutation. And I'm not going to give anything away, but the mutation is like, wow, that's a bit outlandish. That seems like if an Inquisitor heard about that, this chapter would be on the block. And then I'll read like 6 paragraphs later, but they're beloved by the Inquisition because this one sort of subsect of the Inquisition sends them on these dirty missions. Yeah. And it's like, we're devaluing the Inquisition a bit here, boys. You know? So it's a hard one. It's a hard one. You don't want your characters and your chapter to be the exception to the rule, right? You want to acknowledge exceptions to the rule, but you want them to fit in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's the thing about it. In the end, it is a grimdark setting, so all the positives should be offset with about twice the amount of negative. Where you can make it work if you do it in a fun way. I think that's like we said, right? The best characters and the best factions are made having a massive downside that gives them character, like Grimaldo's dying, well, almost dying at the end of Hell's Reach, which is in the end what makes them special. The same reason people love the Space Wolves, they have a couple extra things. They're really good against chaos, but at the same time, they literally fall apart into primitives.
That's actually a really good point you make there about finding interesting ways to do these things, because someone and again, I'm not going to name any names throughout any of this episode because I don't want to call anyone out, but I'm going to make a point of not naming the names of people who've done good stuff either. But someone came to me recently with a homebrew, and they had their chapter had a thing that was very unique, and I was reading through it and I thought, this is going to get them in trouble when an Inquisitor finds out. This is going to be bad. And I was kind of getting to the point where I was expecting them to do the same thing. Like, the Inquisition loves them, right? That was the cop-out I'm expecting, because that's the cop-out that's always used. And then I get to a bit where they've written this... I was reading their chapter culture section. There's 2 pages about their chapter culture. And a big part of their culture is keeping what's wrong with them and what's right with them, both in a mutation standpoint, a secret.
Nice.
We're talking 3rd, 4th edition Dark Angel style. And I loved that. I loved that they had this mutation that was it was here or there. But the fact that keeping it a secret was more impactful on the chapter than the mutation itself. That was great. I loved that. Because we're dealing in paranoia and the old school Gothic Warhammer there. That was wonderful. It was such a treat to read. I loved that.
Exactly. It's about adding nuance to your character through negativity as well as positivity. Yeah. But when you add your nuance, it has to have, first of all, a reason to be there. It has to have a beginning and it has to have an endpoint, right? Yeah. So in this case, they keep it secret. Why? If they get found out, it's Jover.
It's Jover. Yeah.
It is.
And even though they have a positive, they can't even use it half the time because they have to hide it, which is how you add interesting parts to a character. He has the power to see the future, but every time he does it, he hears lies.
Yeah, the Imperium hates difference. Anything that's different from the expected norm is bad.
Yeah, the High Lords tried to kill Gilliman, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, they plotted, because even though he's the avenging son, the son of their god, that god could take their position. Yeah. That god could take their power.
Yeah. Just like in, like the first 3 Horus Heresy books, where Horus in the end ends up purging an entire humanoid species because they have small little one small change in their brain. That was it. Just one extra little mechanical organ. They naturally grow there now. That was enough to purge an entire empire. Yeah. And that was during the good times.
Right, should we move on to point number 4? Now, this is this one isn't too bad. If you find yourself doing this, I'd say it's actually, if you find yourself doing this, it's a sign that you probably need to experiment more. It's a sign that if you do this, you're probably further away from the anime OC than you are close to it, and it's a sign that you should lean more in that direction. And that is number 4, the over-reliance on existing tropes. Recycling existing factions. Many homebrew creators base their factions too heavily on existing ones without adding cohesive, unique elements. Or, for example, creating a Space Marine chapter that is too similar to the Ultramarines or the Blood Angels without adding any fresh, compelling traits. Or rehashing character archetypes. Similarly, homebrew characters can often feel like reskins, as you said this a minute ago about Marneus Calgar, reskins of established ones. For instance, making a character that is almost identical to a figure like Abaddon or Guilliman reduces creativity and originality, right? So whilst, I mean, this is actually funny, because if Moots was on this episode, Moots would probably argue against this point, because Moots has this really interesting philosophy about tropes. One of the safest, and I think it's because it's a safe thing to do, and it is, and it's one of the safest things you can do in 40k when you're homebrewing, is lean into the established tropes. I do agree. You should lean into the tropes, but be wary of over-reliance, you know? The biggest one that everyone does is the... it's quite fun. It's, I'm a Salamander's successor, and therefore I am really nice to civilians and the Imperial Guard. That one kills me. It kills me because the successors of the Salamanders, we've got the known successors of the Salamanders, we've got no reason to believe that. We just don't. So it's like, maybe there is one or two, but generally speaking, you know, no one's going to look at the Covenant of Fire and go, oh yeah, those guys, they love civilians. You know, no one's going to look at is it the Dragon Spears, right? No one's going to look at the Dragon Spears and go, oh yeah, they love civilians. You know, because we've got no precedent for that. So, and this is, again, it's much like the Black Templars having that excess of Marines and that gothic nature. One of the things that makes the Salamanders so special is that they're a bit nicer. They're a bit more friendly, you know. Maybe it's not as rule of one the same way the Black Templars having loads of Marines is, but tread carefully around that stereotype. Tread carefully around that trope. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's a really good way to use it as well. In particular, if you're writing a character rather than a chapter, it might actually help to have the chapter be like one of the main ones, because then you can have your character be a part of that chapter and maybe rebel against the sort of regular strictures of their parent chapter without putting a sort of lore contradiction in there with an established named thing. Yeah. It's a great way to have maybe the corruption of a chapter is where they're already so much like another that they're almost a parable for what could happen. Yeah. That's a really good one. That's a fun narrative thing to do that's actually really easy and enjoyable. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And especially if your homebrewing is more focused on narrative rather than state homebrewing, you know, because that's something that I've noticed as a lot of people as well. Some people will homebrew as a state of being, and some people will homebrew as a narrative. Personally, I think homebrewing as a state of being is a bit boring. But again, I'm not your dad, do what you want. I always like to homebrew with narrative. That's my thing. I think if you're homebrewing and you've got your characters and you've got your chapter, they need to go through things. Don't just say, you know, unless you're, well, you know, like I said, I'm not your dad. You do what you want. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. But you know, there is some give and take with existing tropes, I think, you know, because it's not all bad, right?
Yeah, it's about playing the right ones, but it's also like a lot of people like to make the mistake of like, I'm gonna do orc death skulls, but instead they are Imperial Guardsmen. They just love money and they keep stealing things from other factions. It's a really cool idea and stuff, but you can combine some tropes that can be really fun. You can add a fun little thing, but if that's their only focus, it does the same thing as like, oh, it's a Salamander successor, so it must be nice to civilians. Or it must be a Marines Malevolent follower, so they must hate every civilian that ever lived. By playing against tropes so now and then as well, having the right mixture of tropes that flow well, and the exact opposite of certain tropes. Maybe it's a Salamander successor and they absolutely hate civilians. Yeah. That is a fun trope that you can use, but just play with it a little bit. Give it a slight twist, and that's what makes it interesting.
That's a good thing to... I mean, I was gonna write about this as well. I'm not a fan of inverting tropes. Because when you invert a trope, you will find yourself relying on the trope. You're just relying on it inverted. But what you can do, on a similar vein, is invert the trope and then use that as a springboard into something unique. For example, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to make salamanders, but they're really mean. Okay, cool. But use that as a premise. Build upon that. Don't just stick with just that. Say, okay, well, they're certain mean in these circumstances, right? And here's why. Here's the narrative as to why they're like that. Give it some oomph behind it and some oomph ahead of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't just sit there with oh, hey, I've combined the Marines Malevolent and the Salamanders, and haha, we burn people alive. Even the normal Salamanders do that. You know what I mean? But sorry, just because you said a minute ago about money and orcs, have I told either of you about going off topic for a second? Have I told you about Bank Crasher Coin Grabber?
I've heard the name before.
Holy shit, this is amazing.
All right. Have I told you about this orc, Zarrek?
You haven't. You need to tell me
all right,
now.
I'll tell you. We'll get into this very quickly. So there's this orc that I'm desperate to roleplay for any roleplay thing. I can't do it with the Deathwatch team because obviously it's Deathwatch and it's a fucking orc. But Bank Crasher Coin Grabber is based off of 2 characters in fiction. Have you seen Rain Man?
Yes, a little bit.
So the guy who's like he's a little bit, he's not quite there, but he's got impeccable mathematical skills. He can like count cards and shit. He's based off of Rain Man and Joe Fixit. The grey version of the Hulk, the gangster one.
What? Yeah, I kind of do know that character, and I don't know why.
Yeah. So Bank Crasher Coin Grabber. He is this mobster. He thinks he's this mobster orc, but he's like a rogue trader's kind of orc companion. And he thinks himself above everything else. He's like, if he sees you and you're like a rich imperial, he's gonna try and be buddy with you because he's like, oh yeah, you're rich as well. I like you. He's that kind of guy, right? I need some way to roleplay this character. He's just
that's
he's
brilliant.
in my soul. Anyways, no, moving on. So, point number 5. I'm not going to dwell on this one too long because this one is more of a point about writing than I think it is about homebrewing, but there is some crossover, so I'll just go through it. And so that's point number 5. Poor narrative and thematic coherence. So, incoherent backstories. For example, characters or factions sometimes have backstories that do not logically connect to their current situation, leading to narrative gaps, right? A backstory should explain their motivations, flaws, and their current actions in a clear, well-thought-out manner. And overly complex or overly or overdeveloped themes, some homebrew creations get bogged down in excessive thematic development. This is a really big one, actually. This one's huge. This actually touches on our last point as well, about relying on tropes. They'll get bogged down in excessive thematic development, choosing to focus entirely on one little niche trait, e.g., they love fire, to the detriment of the narrative complexity that they could otherwise be engaging in, making them feel one-sided and honestly kind of comical. I get that, our homebrews, even my homebrew has that one thing, right? Every homebrewer, no homebrewer is going to tell me that their chapter is that fleshed out. They don't have that one thing at their core. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you really got to be careful about that being the only thing. Because if everything your chapter does comes back to that thing, it's likely that your chapter is, again, one-dimensional. Let's say your chapter has this unique creed, right? I'm not gonna come up with a creed on the spot because I don't have the brain power for it. But let's say your chapter has this really cool and unique creed, and it's really awesome. But everything they do comes back to that creed. Now that creed, this really cool thing you've come up with, is actually a detriment to everything else they're doing because it's all one-sided, right? Chapters, despite Space Marines being quite simple in theory, if you read any Space Marine novels, or any good ones, you'll know that Space Marines can be really complex, and the humanity that comes out of them can be really complex. And it's a disservice to Space Marines as a fan-fictional concept to make them that degree of one-sided, I think.
Yeah. That's the whole special thing about Space Marines. They have so much capability to have so many facets to them because they are mind-washed children going to war. There's a lot of things you can do here. They have faulty gene seeds. They have terrible experiences for hundreds of years long.
Yeah.
There is things you can play with. So keep it nuanced. Make sure You just don't follow the same pattern as everyone else does.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's it.
Well, we've just had a really big thing, actually, is that they live for hundreds of years. Over those hundreds of years, there's going to be a point where that soul element that would otherwise be their whole personality has to change or shift or warp to suit what's going on around them.
I mean, take Dante, for example, right? The oldest Space Marine, if you don't count the Dreadnought ones, the Chaos Space Marines, and the 100 of other fucking things. You know, Dante, in a lot of his novels, will reflect on his previous centuries. And it will talk about how different he is, how much he's changed, how he sees the Imperium differently. You know, especially in the more modern books. Because he devalues himself now. He doesn't like himself. He doesn't like what he's become. He doesn't really like his role or his place in things, but he does have a very deep-seated sense of duty. And that's very cool, because we all talk about Space Marines being honor-bound and dutiful, but it's easy to say that. It's hard to show that. But Dante does show that. You know, he shows that in how he persists despite being overwhelmingly sad. And this thing, you think of Space Marines, you don't think of depression, you don't think of sadness, tears. But the oldest, wisest Space Marine of them all, he very much does, you know. And other Space Marines can have that too. So yeah, it's a fun one, especially when we're talking about individual characters and emotions and motivations, you know. Can you imagine how awful that would be if you had a character who was going through such an emotional thing, they'd been through so much, they'd seen so many of their brothers die, and then their homebrew writer-in-chief decides, but they don't really care because they've got the Bing Bong Creed, and the Bing Bong Creed says they don't have to care. You know, it's like, come on, man, please.
It's just that Vietnam stare, the 1,000-mile stare into the distance, and then the bell rings and he's just right back to normal.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not really how that works.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they go renegade. There's a reason they turn to chaos, and it's because their honor no longer holds them, or it lessens. They lose their way, and Space Marines can.
Yeah, isn't that fun? How there's a lot of homebrews. Actually, that's something So we have a couple of different spaces for homebrewing in the channel. In the channel's Discord. Plot twist: anyone from the Discord who's listening to this, they're about to get upheaved. We're doing a big shift around how that works very soon. But one of the things we have been doing, we're about to change. But one of the things we have been doing is we've had a separate channel to separate casual homebrewing from law-compliant homebrewing, right? With a heavy emphasis on here's what is law-compliant, you know. I've forgotten the point I was going to make. Fuck.
Give him a moment.
No, I've forgotten. I'm going to cut.
It's gone?
I'm going to cut this bit out.
Into the ether.
Stolen.
Into the
Stole
ether.
them.
I'm going to cut this bit out.
Taken away.
Just gone.
It's just gone.
I had such a good point I wanted to make as well. It's just left me. It's just out of here.
Oh no.
You know, I won't cut it out. I'll leave in my shame. I'll leave in my shame.
You forgot.
No, that's shame.
Yeah. I'm forgetful. That's how it is. You know?
You forgot.
Sometimes you just...
Even a Space Marine could get lost in the middle of a conversation.
That's how it goes. You know? The Emperor protects, but he doesn't protect your short-term fucking memory, apparently.
I said the 1,000-yard stare and he saw 100 Midas Saints die in front of his eyes.
Oh my god. There's a Space Marine chapter from the Cursed Founding. They got short-term memory loss.
That's the downside. No.
Yeah, they'll be given orders to get down to planet. What are we doing?
It's a Space Marine there's a Space Marine chapter, but they have a GPA below 2. They don't know how a bolt gun works.
But even then, right, you could go to a whole narrative thing of the fact that they're always on this quest to find their quest.
They're on this quest to find their quest. Oh, no.
Yeah, they're always exploring
The
because they
questing
always forget what they came for.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know if I found it, but we must crusade, brothers.
We must crusade on. So let's move on to the next one, unless anyone's got any more to say. I'm terribly sorry, audience. I could have sworn I had a good point to make, but it's left me.
We can come back to it at the end when it inevitably comes back.
In all my time doing this podcast, I don't think I've ever done that. Maybe we'll see. It'll come back to me at the end of the Patron Questions. You watch. It'll come back to me at the end of the Patron Questions.
Oh, for sure.
Right, number 6. Here we go. We've touched upon this one a little bit already. And that is scale and numbers management. So,
Oh,
inflating numbers. Giving homebrew factions or armies massive, unrealistic numbers compared to established forces. E.g., a Space Marine chapter having millions of Astartes. Breaks immersion's lore plausibility. Insert our conversation about the Black Templars. Or, misunderstanding the scale of the universe. Warhammer 40k operates on an enormous scale. And misunderstandings about distances, timeframes, and army logistics can make a homebrew faction feel a little bit out of place, right? And the opposite is true as well. You know, sometimes the universe is so massive that you can expect the impact your chapter's going to have to be almost non-existent. You know, it's rare that this mistake is made. To be fair, now I think about it out loud, but sometimes. The one I'm about to quote at least, but sometimes you do see homebrewers who will talk about how their Space Marine chapter saved insert planet or insert person or insert thing, and Deus Ex Machina the saving of the entire Imperium. You know, it's rare, but it does happen. But when it comes to scale and numbers mismanagement, that shit happens a lot. It's very common for people to say, you know, come back to the Black Templars thing. It's very common for people to say, oh yeah, my chapter's been on a permanent crusade since M35 and no one's ever questioned it, and they now have, you know, 10,000 Marines and the Inquisition loves them. So yeah, it's just, do we need to dwell on this point? Do you think we've already covered this one?
No, I think we have. It is indeed just a case of keep the numbers in mind. Don't go too crazy with it. Yes, 1,000 Space Marines going up against the Hive World is going to be very hard. There's trillions of people on there against 1,000 Marines.
Yeah.
But there's a reason they are the Special Strike Force. Most people in the Imperium have never even seen a Space Marine or have had a Space Marine grace their planet in the last 3,000 years.
Yeah.
That is the thing about the setting. So keeping it realistic, maybe your chapter does have 1,200 Marines. Maybe they have 300 Scout Marines. That is within reason, because they're allowed to have that. But don't go into the tens, hundreds, or more, because they're not a Space Marine Legion. And once again, the Bad Up War is a very good example of what happens.
Well, actually, I will say it before we move on to the next point. A very quick little cheat you can do with numbers. Don't mention numbers.
Just
your chapter can be as big as you want, as long as you don't say. And I mean that in a really funny way. And it's the whole show don't tell. Show them being everywhere at once, like the Black Templars, but don't say. You know, show them being the kind of chapter that gets around a lot, but don't say. You know. Anyways, right. Moving on to the next point. This one's really important because this one happens a lot. Oh, what was that, Zarrek?
Well, I did want to say one last thing about scale, and that is don't make it too small. Don't make it too small either, because if you do that, you pigeonhole yourself.
Yes.
And they can't be much bigger.
Yes, my chapter only defends this one system in this one sector. Don't do that shit. That's their charge, but that's not their sole charge, right?
I genuinely, for a wee while, had a warband that I considered making only about 30 Marines, and they would all die, necessarily. But that's 30 Marines. I can't even make an army with that.
No.
That's not an actual army.
That's 3 to 6 squads.
Yeah, then I built 10 more Marines and went, okay, 30 is too little because I've already built more than 30. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's impossible.
No, it's basically an Ordo Xenos entourage at that point.
Yeah, just don't say it.
Yeah.
Don't say it, don't think it.
Yeah.
Just imply. You can imply, and then you can just go back on it at any point when you've decided that's shit and you don't like it anymore.
Yeah, I think some of the problems with people doing this though comes from this new sci-fi anime generation, where sci-fi and anime are far more popular and prevalent now than they ever have been. And both of those two things, both generic Western sci-fi and anime, do something that's terrible, and that's to get shock value or scale value, cheap scale value, they will just say, oh wow, this mech is 10,000 times larger than the biggest mech I've ever seen. And it's like, you know, you've put a number on it because you want to give it power scaling, but really you're just detracting from an opportunity to be descriptive and to actually give it some narrative weight. You know, really fucking common in anime, really common in cheaper sci-fi medias. I'm not saying doing that makes something bad, but I am saying it's done in absence of actual descriptions. You know, it's like we want narrative, we want story, we want intrigue. If we want to read the scale of something, We'll read a fucking encyclopedia, right? It's cool when it's fucking necessary or when there's no alternative. But I don't believe that there's no alternative, unless, again, I mean, this is the difference between narrative homebrew writing and state homebrew writing. If you're writing your homebrew as in a state of being or a state of a chapter, it makes more sense there. That's where it's interesting, because now you're writing your chapter as an encyclopedia, as a breakdown, right? I don't really do that, though. I'll do elements of that, but I will always prefer to write my chapter as something that is within a narrative. The only exception to that is when I write my chapter's codex. That's the only exception to that, because that's where it kind of needs to be a little bit. But if you've ever read a codex, there's a fuck ton of narrative stuff in there as well. Maybe even more narrative stuff than not, so...
Well, yeah, but even then, when you take your tally count in your codex, that'll be a snapshot in time. It will be dated to whatever, and that will change immediately. Yeah.
Well, that's quite funny, because that's the problem with doing a state-based homebrew, because if a big upheaval happens in the lore, imagine doing a state-based homebrew, and then a year later, the Cicatrix Maledictum opens up, and your chapter's fucking homeworld is somewhere along the line. It's like, do you turn around and say, aha, my chapter has had its first narrative development in a year, and they are exactly the same, but they are a fleet-based chapter now. Like, come on, man.
Mm-hmm. They watched their homeworld die before them, falling apart as another Blackstone fortress was yeeted at the speed of light at it, and they're just like, oh man, I can't go, I'll just go sit on my ship now, I'm gonna go be sat in my room. Like, that's not character development.
No.
That's just a minor inconvenience.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on to the next one. This one's fun. Ooh. So, point number 7. Breaking the grimdark atmosphere. Too much hope or idealism. Warhammer 40k is renowned for its grimdark setting, where hope is fleeting and humanity is often struggling for survival. Introducing overly optimistic or utopian space marine characters or factions in general disrupts the atmosphere of the universe, or inappropriate humor or lightheartedness, because while orcs are occasionally exhibit black humor and stuff like that, consistently inserting comic relief into a serious, or what would be a serious, factional character really diminishes the oppressive tone of 40k. And actually, I'll show you a character who's done this right. They don't have a lot of writing about them. It's very sort of off the cuff. Little bits. But do you know Iron Father Feroz?
Yes.
Iron Father Feroz is brilliant, because Iron Father Feroz is an Iron Hands Iron Father. And what makes him unique is all of the Iron Hands are like, they're robotic as fuck. And I mean that in an emotional sense. That is how the Iron Hands are. They are super robotic emotionally. An Iron Hand would be, Space Marines would be, any Space Marine worth his salt would throw himself into the jaws of death instantly. An Iron Hand would do it even faster, because they are so binary with their decision making.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's interesting about Feroz is he is a character he is an Iron Hand character who has a sense of gallows humor. The man is capable of laughing, and even though the man's mostly machine, laughing and cracking jokes in the face of demise. And that's really interesting, because he's an Iron Hand. Because someone somewhere went, let's create that contrast. Let's put him in that chapter. The chapter who is overly robotic, who is overly unemotional. Let's put him there. And so suddenly it's, okay, here's comedy or lightheartedness in a Space Marine chapter done right, because it's the exception. It's used as an exception. It recognizes the rule, it treats the rule with respect, and throws it out there. But making a chapter that, and this comes back to the liking civilians thing, right? Or being too nice to the Imperial Guard. And I know your chapter, Zarrek. I know your chapter is nice to the Guard. I'm not talking about them. Because being nice...
No, they're not. They're not. Mm-hmm. They just pretend to be.
They just pretend to. Excellent. Even better.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Excellent. Flesh shields. Wonderful. No, the idea of a chapter, because this one I have read loads. There's shitloads of entries I've read that have had this quandary, and that's that they are super nice to guardsmen and civilians. It's the salamanders thing. I think some people overestimate how nice the salamanders are, because they'll say, oh yeah, my chapter is like the salamanders, and then they'll write their chapter to be at least 10 times nicer than the salamanders are. A salamander would still throw a human in the way of a fucking orc if it would serve their tactical needs, right? A salamander would still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They filled a hive with promethium and burnt it to ash with people inside because that was the only way they'd kill the orcs.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. But I think this is one of the things that irks me a little bit, because it's not just that forget the fact that you're out salamandering the salamanders, right? But you are trying to introduce that degree of nicety into a homebrew chapter. You're not in 40k anymore. You're not in the grimmest of darkest futures where everything is the worst it can possibly be, where all hope is lost. You can add flickers of hope. You can add flickers of idealism and, little glimmering lights of goodness. But to add a whole faction centered around that, here's one I read, and again, I'm not gonna lie. Me and the boys have reviewed this chapter several times because it should be. I'm not going to name the chapter. I'm not going to name who made it. There's only a couple pages, but it should be. What's the word? It should be encased in bronze and sealed for all time and studied for the rest of history, because it's one of those chapters I go to kind of meditate, if you will. And the way they are relevant to this point is they are so good to civilians and other people is they will let in the mutant, they will let in the disease ridden, they will let in the chaos worshipper and rehabilitate the chaos. And we're talking about space marines here. We're not talking about fucking the Imperium's intervention clinic. We're talking about space marines, and it's so overcooked and it's so overdone. And it's like this chapter, forgetting the fact that it's not exactly law compliant. Space Marines won't do that shit. Forgetting that for a minute, even if somehow we could feasibly say they could. What we're looking at here is a de-grimdarking of the setting.
Yeah,
we're looking at anywhere these Space Marines go. It's like it's fucking Star Wars. Not that I've got a problem with Star Wars, but Star Wars is known for its hope and idealism. Hope and idealism are the running themes that make Star Wars interesting, or have always made Star Wars interesting. Whether Star Wars is or isn't interesting anymore is up to the individual. But hope and idealism and rebellion have always been the things that have made Star Wars special. That does not belong in Warhammer 40k. It is the grimmest of darkest of realities.
Well, there's a counterpoint to that. And I think I generally saw an academic essay written about this. But hope is an essential part of 40k, not because it's the ideal of 40k, but because it always has to be there to allow grimdark to seep back in. You can't have the shadow without a light.
This is true.
But the point of hope here is almost always to mislead. Hope always misleads characters in 40k because there is no hope. And when they find hope, it's almost always illusory or beyond their reach or something that they really aren't meant to obtain.
Yeah. I agree completely. I agree 100%, yeah. It's that flicker of hope, that flicker of idealism, that flicker of, okay, if we can just do this, we can finally have the life we want. It's a carrot and stick, except the carrot is made of lead.
Yeah,
it's painted.
It's the case. Like 40k always has played the role of 11:59 to midnight, like right before the bell hits, right before either everything falls down or true hope can be found, and that is something that you should always represent. That don't play too much into hope. Don't let them to be too positive. Yeah. Let them be on the way to there, but don't outright say they are, because that is where you take it away. They can be on the way there. They can be hoping to get there, but it is 40k. Some Chaos Warband might randomly crash into the side of their ship and just ruin their day royally.
It happens.
It happens.
No. Or hell, someone could be set up to have an actual solution. Someone could solve the problem, but because it's 40k, something has to prevent that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a panacea for a great plague outbreak. Of course, that never gets spread because it was invented by a civilian.
Yeah.
Not a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus or the Inquisition.
Yeah.
And so they're shunned.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. See, that's the kind of shit why I like 40k, because that's that real exemplification of hopelessness. It is that's a perfect example of I think that's a perfect example of the point you were trying to make. This glimmer, this fleeting glimmer this fleeting mirage of a glimmer of hope.
Yeah. Almost a piece of hope. Almost.
Yeah.
Maybe we have the solution, but it gets taken away instantly. Maybe the mechanics of the space walls can be solved. Maybe it can be stable. And then the scientist that has to do that gets eaten by a kraken. It's like, it can be anything you need it to be, but that's also what makes it fun. And it allows for some hilarious moments where you're telling about your homebrew and just make people laugh, which is also something that 40k loves. There is some parts in 40k lore that love to be a little sarcastic or just give it a little cruel twist at the end that just kind of puts a smile on your face. And like, that is so over the top. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And it's always bound up in hypocrisy.
Yeah.
The Imperium and every other faction in 40k is self-defeating.
Right, shall we move on to the next one? Mm-hmm. This next one I have a lot to say about. Number 8. The lack of plausibility and the misuse of law precedents. So, lack of plausibility, right? This first bit, take with a pinch of salt, but I wanted to mention it anyway because despite it being 40k, people can still fuck this up. And that's ignoring realism in warfare. What? Bolters exist? No, I know they don't exist. I know none of this shit is real or has any resemblance on realism. But that doesn't mean Marnius Calgar should be able to climb a Khorne Lord of Skulls and tear its head off or be able to pick up a Necron pylon. Oh god, don't trust. There's 500 books. There's more than 500 books if you count the codexes and the compendiums. Don't trust the fucking...
in-universe propaganda. It's in-universe propaganda. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
But, so some homebrew ideas don't consider the logistics, strategy, or the realities of warfare. For example, this happens so much. This happens so much. Factions that never... homebrew factions that never suffer losses or who succeed in every battle... but their losses are just artificial or superficial, right? Their losses are just sort of like, or unrealistic power creep, right? Introducing factions or, God forbid, technologies that easily eclipse others without considering the checks and balances within the 40k universe. Because I can't remember what it was, but someone had this unique type of weapon for their homebrew. And it was basically like a bolter turned up to 11.
Oh.
It was some special thing. And my question to them was, okay, well, why doesn't the rest of the Imperium have this? And they were like, oh, my homebrew secretly guards it from the rest of the Imperium. Only my homebrew can have the special bolt. It's not actually a bolter, it's something else. I'm red herring you all. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, oh, but this did happen where I had a conversation with someone where they had this really special thing, and it was like, why doesn't the rest of the Imperium have that? Or at least why doesn't the Adeptus Astartes have that? Why doesn't Belisarius Cawl have that? What, and every single answer they gave me, it wasn't an explanation, it was a workaround. Oh my god, I can't believe I haven't said this yet. Be really careful in your homebrewing, whether you'll really learn the difference between giving an explanation and giving a workaround. If you're giving a workaround, don't do it. Please, because we can always tell when it's a workaround. Mm-hmm. If it's an actual explanation, fine. But it's like, if you have to ask someone, oh yeah, if I did this and that, would it mean I could have X or I could have Y? That probably means you're about to do a workaround. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the way to tell is that an explanation will have consequences, things you have to account for. A workaround has no ramifications at all.
No. You're right. Or very few ramifications, or ramifications that are, aforementioned, superficial,
Yeah.
But another one is like, okay, so, all right, this is where I'm going to go off on one. Or I'm going to try and not go off on one, because I'm about to talk about something that's dear to my heart, that the other guys on the team have heard me go off on several times, so I'm going to keep it.
Pop off.
And this is misusing law precedents.
Oh.
So,
yep.
Misusing law precedents. Using vague or one-off instances in the law to justify Space Marines or chapters doing, being, or possessing things that are implausible. For example, using the Ashen Clause as a justification for creating a renegade chapter that can survive eternally without the fear of demise. Now, do you guys know who the Ashen Claws are?
Yes, sir.
Alex, would you like to tell the audience just very quickly who the Ashen Claws are so I can make my point?
So the magical Ashen Claws have somehow made their way after getting banished from the Legion during the Horus Heresy. Well, right at the end, right before the Horus Heresy. Essentially, they are Terran-born Raven Guards still going around. They are pirates, not part of the Imperium, not part of Chaos. They don't do deals with Xenos, and they somehow have survived a space shark attack. No matter what happens, they are always at around like 600 to 800 Marines, and they have like fell blades and things. It's a good example of a chapter that should not have been around for the last at least 6,000 years.
Yeah. So, whilst the Carcharodon books that feature the Ashen Claws are generally good books, the Ashen Claws are used as a plot device to show how the space sharks are sort of willing to do things not so above board to get the job done, right? They're used as a device to exemplify the space sharks. But we know from other examples, like the Astral Claws, the Flame Falcons, the Soul Drinkers, and the Relictors, that Renegade chapters have very good reasons for being on a limited lifespan. Whereas the Ashen Claws are generally just a very poorly explained plot device. And really, if you're using them as an example to justify certain homebrewing decisions for your Renegade chapter, it's a really bad foundation for that, because the Ashen Claws have very limited explanations for how they've gotten to where they are. It doesn't really make sense when it's held up against other things. This is what I said about how there's over 500 Warhammer 40k books. Not all of them are good, and not all of the good ones are going to be completely good or are going to be filled with good stuff. You know, it's all very difficult. Usually if something is true, we will have multiple things to look at and go, this is true because A, B, C, and D. You know, or all the way up to Z. We know for Renegades, with every other example of Renegades, outside of the Ashen Claws, every single other example of Renegades show that Renegades have an impossible time surviving.
Yep.
At absolute best, they will turn to Chaos, and they'll survive as a Chaos warband, like the Astral Claws turning into the Red Corsairs. Yeah? But the Ashen Claws have been Renegade Space Marines for 10,000 years, and absolutely not fuck all explanation, but the explanation has always been very weak, very pitiful, very lackluster. I had someone over a year ago try to start a bit of an argument with me about this, and it took all the will in the world for me to just not, have this rant at them, because I'm quite passionate about this point, because I love well-done Renegade chapters, because well-done Renegade chapters are the hardest chapters to write well. And when you see one written well, you will sit there and you'll read that whole document or that whole codex or that whatever, and you'll feel like, wow, I wish I came up with that. I've read that. I've read Homebrew Renegades where I've gone, wow, I wish that was my idea. Because it's so much effort. And then to someone to say, oh, well, my Renegade has this, and that. And I say, well, how? And they go, well, if the Ashen Claws can... And I check out the conversation. I just check out.
Yep.
Like I said at the start of this episode, disclaimer, this is just my opinion. Do what you want. Just enjoy yourself. Honestly, enjoy yourself. Just have a good time. Mm-hmm. Just have a good time. It's just my opinion. It doesn't mean much. But fuck the Ashen Claws.
They are such an easy play, and they're such an easy fix. But the thing is they are the exemption of the exemption of the exemption. They are the rarest kind of chapter that exists.
The fun thing is, the books they're featured in, all written by Robbie McNiven, the Carcharodon's books.
Yeah.
They're not bad books.
Yeah, they're good. They're good books.
It's just he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this chapter, and just give them fucking really weak-ass explanations. and we're just going to have them be a plot device, and we're just going to hope that the fucking audience doesn't think hard about it at all.
Source, I made it up.
Source. What's your source? Well, Jack, I made it the fuck up.
Yeah, as an exception, I'll talk a little bit about my personal homebrewing experience, because I primarily like to homebrew rules. I like to write homebrew rules for units and characters and things. And Precedents is a big tool in that. When you're trying to make a little data sheet for your special guy, you kind of want lore precedents for most of your abilities. Just to know that you're doing it right, that it fits with the mechanics of 40k. But that doesn't mean you can just take the rules from any unit in the game and apply them to anything new.
Yeah.
I don't want to shame a friend, but a friend of mine did essentially try to do Gaunt's Ghosts, but a different faction.
Oh, interesting.
But it really doesn't work because they took all the same abilities and ability keywords without considering why it's just the guard that gets that.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine a Space Marine with fights first and lone op and stealth,
Oh my god!
And generating command points
and
command abilities.
Oh no!
I love my friend dearly. But you need to understand that there are times that you don't want to take a precedent at face value, and you need to consider why it's within this context, and if what you're doing is also in this same context. For, say, the Ashen Claws, it kind of works because they're not actually the center of attention. They're not central to who the story's about. But they're a device, like you were saying.
Can I circle back for something real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Something you said about homebrewing rules, and it's a bit off topic, but we're good like that here. One of the interesting things is someone did a homebrewed Space Marine captain recently in the server.
Okay.
And he basically tried to combine Helbrecht and Dante.
Oh no.
So imagine Helbrecht.
Right.
Imagine Helbrecht with a jump pack. And and all sorts of other fucky-wucky stuff. And this is purely, we're talking about homebrew and gameplay stuff. If you don't play the game, you can skip ahead 20, 30 seconds. I'm not going to judge you. But if you're interested, whatever. And basically what he created for his character as an in-game playable thing was a guy that he justified by saying, oh, don't worry, I'll points cost it. Fun fact, even if you over points cost something, you don't guarantee it's not going to be unfun. And guess what? If you make something for the game and it being fun isn't your first and foremost priority as a homebrewer, for gaming at least, you are doing something wrong. It being fun has to trump everything else. Take, for example, the Astartes Knight Porphyrion. The Astartes Knight Porphyrion is a knight that costs 800 points to bring in game. That is way too much. It's way too much. It's not viable. However, if you bring it, your opponent will kill you. Your opponent will throw a brick at you because it's unfun, because it's got 2 guns and their gun's datasheet basically says, I delete whatever I look at. Is it Primarch? Get deleted. Is it whole ass Imperial Knight? Get deleted. Is it a fucking Warhound Titan? 2/3 of the time, you're probably going to get deleted. So it just, if you're homebrewing data sheets, for the love of God, fun comes first. Think of your opponents, because you will be very lucky if you've gotten as lucky as me, and you've got friends like I have who will occasionally bless you with letting you play your custom data sheets. You need to prioritize your friend enjoying themselves, or they will never let you do it again. So for all that's holy, for all that's good and blessed, please prioritize fun. Don't just combine 2 characters and say, don't worry, I'm going to points cost it to make it fair. That's not enough. Sorry, I had to get that rant out the way.
No, I understand.
You see that where I see a data sheet, it's like, wow, this is really cool, but this looks like it's going to give me cancer to play against. I don't want, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'll points cost it. No, you fucking won't. Shut up.
I think I audibly heard the vein on your head pop.
I think you were you there for that conversation?
I don't think I was,
No,
but I've seen enough that are similar.
Yeah, so it was like... Oh.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's move on to the next point, shall we, before I talk about the Ashen Claws again. Number 9, Overcomplicating The Setting. This is an interesting one, because you might think this is counterintuitive, but it's not. It doesn't have to be. So, too many features or gimmicks. So adding an overwhelming number of unique traits or rules or gimmicks to a faction or a character can make them really difficult to engage with. Simplicity, when combined with depth, tends to be more effective, right? Or having an unclear focus. Some homebrew Space Marine content really does try to do too much. Including multiple new elements, e.g. psychic powers, special weapons, political ties and intrigue, special relationships with other people and other factions, without properly developing any one of them, leading to a lack of a clear focus. And it's kind of like the antithesis of the last thing we were talking about. We were talking about focusing on that one thing. You also cannot focus on too many things either. You have to pick your battles. I don't mean literal battles. I mean, you have to pick what you're going to focus on, because, a jack of all trades is a master of none. And a master of one is boring as fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to have at least some focuses, so you're... Like, the thing is, every good faction, every good character can be described in, like, a paragraph, and that should honestly be for every homebrew as well. You need a couple things that do make them special. Don't overindulge in it, but also don't overindulge in doing, like, oh, I don't want them to focus too much on one thing. They're going to be a jack of all trades, essentially just Ultramarines plus at that point. But still somehow
Karl. More quote-unquote interesting than the Ultramarines, or more special, in the really contrived kind of way.
But they get headaches,
Actually, I don't want to take the piss. I love 30k Ultramarines, but 40k Ultramarines do feel like fan fiction sometimes.
Yeah.
I say fan fiction, not homebrewing, as an intentional word choice. Because 40k Space Marines... Between Uriel Ventress is okay, but between Kaito Sicarius... Sometimes, yeah. That's what I mean.
That's what I mean.
Don't
make me think of the Chaos
Trade.
You're
right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So it's between... somehow, Agaman, the first company captain of the Ultramarines, is like the only Ultramarine character who's not fucked. Because between Kaito Sicarius, Marnius Calgar, Uriel Ventress, and Captain Motherfucking Titus, who I love, by the way... the Ultramarines really do border on fanfiction quite a lot.
There is only one good Ultramarine, and that's Malum Kato, because he is Korn's best boy.
Malum Kaito. I love that guy.
Korn's best boy.
Do you know why the first captain is actually reasonable?
What, Agaman?
It's because he didn't get a model. That's why.
Well, he does. No, he does have a model.
He does have a model?
Technically, the Leviathan captain in Terminator armor is canonically Agaman. It's just
technically, but he doesn't have a character model, is what I'm saying.
He doesn't have a character data sheet. He certainly has a character model. That's Agaman. all these people painting up their Blood Angel Terminator captains from the Leviathan box are just painting red Agaman.
Agaman, but he's fitting a little Malum Kato-like.
It's just you got the salamanders extra tan Agaman today. But no, that's what I mean. Like, I don't think we need to cook this point too much more, because it's just the inverse of the other one, right? It is what it is, right? But the next point is a little bit more interesting. And to talk about this point, I have to talk about other factions, but it's still true of the Imperium. And that's number 10, overlooking internal conflict. So, lack of flaws or dissonance, right? Warhammer 40k factions and characters often contain internal conflict, contradictions, or flaws, e.g., the Imperium's corruption or the tragic nature of the Eldar. Creating a faction that is too unified, we're coming back to someone focusing on their special chapter cult again, their chapter creed. Creating a faction that is too unified or perfect robs it of depth and complexity. Factions that lack internal tension feel unrealistic in, the grim, dark universe, so to speak. Because, and again, I'm going to use that same example. You've got two characters who don't get along. Two Space Marines who've got wildly different approaches. Maybe one's a brother sergeant and one's a battle brother. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they decide to put their qualms aside because... we've got the Bing Bong Creed, so we don't care that we disagree. And it's like, no. Take a look at, even though I could be quite critical of Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 spoilers, again, jump ahead about 60 seconds if you want to avoid the story. I'm spoilers again. 3, 2, 1, jump now. Take a look at Space Marine 2, the situation where Titus got in his fight with Gadriel. And Gadriel almost fucking killed him, And it's like, whoa, hold the fuck up. These two almost fucking killed each other because they had suspicion and doubt and yada yada. But Gadriel didn't turn around and go, no, I'm an Ultramarine, so it's fine. He said it's fine because his other brother shot someone in the face. Internal conflict is absolutely fucking necessary to homebrewing a Space Marine chapter, because much like Kaito Sicarius and Agaman, they don't fucking like each other. They don't like each other at all. You've got the second company captain, who is now the captain of the Victrix Honor Guard, and you've got the first company captain. These guys fucking hate each other. Internal conflict is one of the best things you can do for character-driven narratives. I mean, this is like writing 101, right? Who wants to read a story where everyone gets along?
What do you mean? That's why I read all the Salamander book. That's why I do it. That's the fun part.
Star Trek was kind of popular for a while.
Yeah.
I had to fucking catch myself there, Zarrek. I almost took that personally. I was about to assume that you haven't watched any Star Trek for a minute then.
Of course I've watched bloody Star Trek. I'm only talking about half the episodes, not all of them.
Fuck off. Right, unless anyone's got anything else to say on internal conflict?
No. No.
So, number 11. I've actually numbered this as number 12, but I fucked my numberings up in my notes. But this is number 11. This is a fun one, because this is really relevant to homebrewing Space Marines. Loyalist Space Marines, especially. Mm-hmm. And that's misunderstanding the role of chaos. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Oversimplifying chaos. Chaos is a multifaceted force in Warhammer 40k, and reducing it to a mere evil or corruption misses its nuanced nature. Some homebrew creators treat chaos as this one-dimensional antagonist, failing to explore the complex relationships between chaos gods, their followers, and how they influence the galaxy. Not just the galaxy, but the conflicts within it, the conflicts that will involve your homebrew chapter. The biggest way this is characterized is someone will say, oh yeah, I'll ask, like, oh, does your chapter have a rival or something that, a recurring enemy, do they have something like that? And they'll go, yeah, it's this Chaos Warband that my friend made, or it's this Chaos Warband called the Butt Munchers 9000 Brigade, or some shit like that, right? And this Chaos Warband will be Nurgle worshippers, and I'll ask, oh wow, what's the prevalence of them being Nurgle worshippers? And they won't know. They won't know what to say. They won't know why they picked Nurgle. They'll just go, or maybe sometimes they'll be really honest and they'll say, oh, I just don't like Nurgle. Or maybe I like Nurgle. And it's like, oh. You don't want to talk about any of the pestilence or the horrible things that happens when Nurgle takes over a world compared to Khorne. You don't want to talk about the recent Plague Wars. You just don't like Nurgle. So Chaos has lots of nuance. Lots of opportunities to explore. My homebrew chapter has the same thing, right? Has a recurring rival, right? Just because I personally find having a rival that is a fixed point of your chapter's history as an antagonist to be a very good thing to come back to, and that is the combined forces of Slaanesh, And this has actually led big time into how my chapter's culture works, how the culture of the people in my chapter's homeworld works. The denial of excess, the denial of pleasure, the excess of emotional discipline. So it's seeped its way into the small things, and then we can build outwards toward the grander things too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's a real shame, because especially if you're someone who homebrews Chaos Space Marines, right? And your Chaos Space Marines are Khornates, and then one of your buddies is like, oh yeah, my chapter's rivals are Khorne. And you ask him the same thing, oh, why have you picked Khorne? And he doesn't know. You're just going to feel like an asshole. You're just going to feel like an idiot. Because you know why Khorne is cool. You know why you like Khorne. You know why Khorne and Khornate forces are so awesome, and your friends just pick Khorne on a whim because, oh, they look like demons maybe, or some other trite shit.
Yeah, some people also, when it comes to Chaos, a lot of people underestimate how truly evil Chaos really is.
Oh yeah,
like the corrupt, like we all make the joke of like, haha, corruption, this and that. But when you read some of the more horror orientated stories, like let's say The King of Pigs, where a simple person thinks he's helping a little pig, in the end ending up being a massive plague demon he's brought into his hive city. the thing is about chaos, it's very subtle at first. That's why a lot of people underestimate it. It's like, oh, it's just stinky marines and then some flies, and that's Nurgle, right? Like, no. It can be rot of the soul that can lead 20 generations down the line. So when you are using chaos as a tool within your chapter, understand that chaos is a lot more corrupting than people give it credit for. Because we get a lot of examples like, oh, Marnie's Color can never be corrupted. Grimaldus can never be corrupted. Can they really, though?
Yeah, that's the fun one. I got some smack from someone once because I said on one of the podcasts that I arrogantly said the words something along the lines of, we all know Grey Knights can be corrupted.
Oh,
did I get some fucking I get some fucking shit for saying that? Holy crap. Apparently, we don't all know that. Apparently,
clearly.
Yeah. So as it turns out, we don't all know that. My logic that I'll explain now, and I'll still have people in the comments telling me I'm stupid.
I'll back you up. I know what you're about to say.
I'm about to talk about Crow. I'm about to talk about Crow, because Crow has the sword. I've forgotten the name of the fucking sword. I shouldn't have, because I've done several shorts on this fucking sword.
The Blade of Antwer.
That's it. It's a funky name, isn't it? It's a funky name. And Crow needs to exert so much will, so much focus, so much dedication to not be corrupted by the sword. You know, just because something has not been corrupted doesn't mean something cannot be corrupted. And I'm telling you now, the Custodes got corrupted. And I'm not saying they turned evil, they more got possessed, right? But close enough.
Yeah, forcefully possessed.
Close enough, right? And half the fucking Primarchs got corrupted. I'm sorry, the Grey Knights, they're not immune. Chaos is a all-powerful thing. It is the ultimate depiction of evil. This is actually, I'd say the fact that they can get corrupted is why the Grey Knights are so special, because the Grey Knights, they go up against the worst of it. They go up against the absolute terror of it.
Dude, can I pop off for a minute?
Yeah,
I got a lot to say about the Grey Knights.
Yeah, go for it.
Here we go.
Firstly, why would they wear the Aegis armor with hexagrammic wards if they weren't capable of being corrupted? There would be no point in having their special anti-demon armor if they were already immune to demons.
Or covering their armor in the blood of sisters, you know, as a ward against a certain demon.
And
crazy,
another thing,
right?
They have a Justicar. I forget his name, but he's a perpetual. But they will never let him rise in rank.
His name is like Anvil Thorn or something like that.
I think it is, yeah.
Is it Anvil?
Something like that, yeah. But they don't trust him because they fear taint in him. They find it unnatural that he can be resurrected, and they're concerned that he could be corrupt. But if he is corrupt, then that breaks their sterling record and reputation. Yep. Anyway, but aside from that...
So even they think they might be corrupt.
Yes. So Grey Knights can hypothetically be corrupted, but they haven't yet, as far as we know.
And that's the important. The as far as we know is the important bit, actually.
Well, until like 8th edition, until it was 8th or 9th edition, it was believed that sisters couldn't be corrupted, with the exception of Muriel Sabacel. However, it was then revealed that when a sister is corrupted, another sister, or I think it's a vehicle, takes her name, and then they hunt her down and kill her.
Yep.
Oh, haven't we got a shitload of Cornate sisters running around at the moment, thanks to Angron?
Maybe.
Maybe.
But
whoopsie daisy, haha.
I do have a point to say about Chaos.
Yeah.
And it's about the way that Chaos worshippers act. And there's a good reason that none of them are about liberation or about freeing people truly from the shackles of the Imperium. And it's because all they learned while they were in the Imperium was how to conquer and enslave. And so naturally, when they become corrupted, all those inclinations of conquering and enslaving just got heightened.
Yep.
That's why Chaos is the way it is. And it's not necessarily even entirely due to Chaos. It's because that's what the Imperium was. And so it was reflected and warped. Because that's what Chaos does.
Oh, can I talk about Star Trek?
Absolutely, go on.
God, here we go.
The Next Generation, Season 1, A Skin of Evil. You know the one?
I might do.
Oh no, it's just, you just made me think of it. So Picard goes down to the crew. as the bridge crew.
Right, yeah.
Deanna Troi and an unnamed officer who dies, of course, get stuck on a planet, and the crew has to go down and save them. And on this planet is one thing, a single creature, a being, that Picard calls a skin of evil. And this creature is like a naive embodiment of the culmination of all of chaos as a single thing. It's omnipotent, and the only way to defeat it was to make it like look at its own reflection because of how horrid it was, right? I fucking love Star Trek. Oh god, why do you say Star Trek? I'm sorry, everyone, if you're too young, because I know we got a lot of youngsters who watch this podcast. I don't mean youngsters like kids. I mean just a bit on the the new generation of 40k fans. I know a lot of you guys haven't seen Star Trek, and that's fine. That's fine. But the next generation was so pivotal for me. I loved that shit, honestly. I'm going to be so sad when Patrick Stewart bites it. I'm going to be so sad.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we've got off topic again.
So, just a little bit.
So, Grey Knights, yes. Grey Knights can be corrupted, they just haven't been yet. So, let's move on to the next one. This one is actually a really good one that I was tempted to put much sooner in the list, but I felt like putting it a bit later on would be more interesting. So, number 12. Too much focus on a single character. So, focusing entirely on one chosen character when homebrewing a Space Marine chapter, right? While some stories have key protagonists, the Warhammer 40k universe, as we've established, is of massive scale, and even its most important characters are part of a much larger tapestry. Over focusing on one chosen individual with no supporting cast or world building makes the lore feel kind of shallow. Richer narratives involve interactions with larger context, and I'd like to explain this by backtracking to the individual I was critical of earlier in the episode, where we talked about this character who went toe-to-toe with Khan and Ghazghul and lived, right? And the Swarm Lord as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Now, this character, some of you, I'm going to say something now, more of you are going to work out who I'm talking about. But don't worry, the point I'm about to make is in this character's favor. Because despite those things, this character, this homebrewed character, exists in a canon Space Marine chapter. Right? Doing that, creating the chosen one character, creating an all-powerful character in a chosen Space Marine chapter is far preferable to creating a homebrew chapter and then just making an all-powerful character in that chapter. Because at least this custom character we're talking about from before, he has context that he can be applied to. He already fits into that larger galaxy. Even if he fits in like a puzzle piece being hammered in place in the wrong direction, he still has something to fit into. If you homebrew a chapter just to really explore a chapter master, bin it. Don't do that. Create a watchmaster instead. Go to the Death Watch, because the Death Watch is all about individuals, and I fucking love the Death Watch.
It's an easy fix. It is always easy fix. Yeah. They also have cool war gear. You want to give him a Xenos weapon? Well, in the Death Watch, they might actually have a chance at finding it.
Oh, I got Xeno weaponry in here somewhere a bit later. We'll get to that.
Oh.
Like, with individual characters, I've found some of my favorite short stories for Space Marines. They've always been no more important than a sergeant.
Yeah.
That is my favorite level of veterancy in a Space Marine story. And it's a short story. It's about Sergeant and their squad. And that's, I think, the perfect scale that you should aim for with a single character, if that's what you're interested in. Yeah,
and this actually I'm going to combine this point with the next point, because they work really well together. We're going to keep on this point. The next point is disregarding existing power dynamics, right? Ignoring established hierarchies. Warhammer 40k has strict power structures, e.g., the Imperium's political, military, religious hierarchy, the hierarchies that exist within chapters. And, some homebrew creations disregard these, allowing their characters or factions to rise to power without accounting for these systems, making the rise feel unearned or implausible. And the way this comes back into Zarrek's point is the interesting thing about sticking to a sergeant is your position in, I think this is the point you tried to make, right? Your position in that power scale, in that power hierarchy, is on a level that everyone can relate to, right? Even though they're a space marine, it doesn't matter that they're a space marine. You know what it's like to have superiors. Every human being knows what it's like to have superiors. People who will boss you around, who will order you about, who you have to take shit from, right? Whether you want to or not, whether you respect them or not. And a sergeant is always there. And a sergeant is always there to delegate as well, to command others, because sometimes everyone has always had a moment where they know what's best. And a sergeant is a great being to encompass that, better than a captain, better than a battle brother, you know. I think it's a really, really nice point to make. I think to take the long way around, I agree completely. If you want to pick a character to focus on, because this is the crazy thing as well. Actually, you're right. Holy shit. A lot of homebrews will have their character list. And they'll be writing about their characters. And it's all cool. It's fine. You can write about your chapter master. You can write about your chief librarian. My favorite character, who I've written the most about in my homebrew, is my Master of Sanctity. I feel kind of silly for doing so now, because you're right. Although you can do that still. But really invest into a single lieutenant or a single sergeant. You know, someone on the ground, someone who knows what it's like to be in the mud of your chapter's engagements and politics, who knows, who has the closest thing your chapter's going to have to an everyman's experience. Yeah, well, that's really good. That's a really great narrative bit of advice as well, Zarrek.
It's really fun. I love those novels, and short stories. But one of the other things about Sergeant is they're not so old that they're infallible. They've not seen everything.
Yeah, they can still be shocked by new experiences. Instead of being like, haha, it's a Lord of Skulls. I know exactly where to hold his helmet and rip it off.
Yeah. Or just defeated in combat as well, yeah.
Yeah.
And in particular, when somebody around them dies, if it's a fellow sergeant, that's harrowing, because you probably would have known that sergeant's squad members, and perhaps your squad has to take on some of their members. That's a whole story there. Maybe the captain above you dies, and now there's a power vacuum. And it's a whole thing of, well, who's taking over? Which lieutenant? What's the chapter master going to say? Or if someone in your squad dies, that's harrowing, because maybe you were recently promoted and this is the first person under your command that you've lost. Oh. There's so many great opportunities at that level because you don't have the experience there just yet. You've got enough.
You've actually almost quoted my favorite Kaito Sicarius moment in Blade of Damocles.
Oh yeah,
where he's a sergeant during Blade of Damocles, and he's got a friend who's and he's got a close friend whose name I've forgotten, who I shouldn't have, who's also a sergeant. And as they're sort of on the planet doing their business, their company captain bites it.
Oh,
and Kaito and this other sergeant are the protagonists of this particular scene, right? And they're talking about how much of a shame it is that their captain's died, and how it's quite bad for the situation. There's a little bit of the other guy scolding Kaito in there as well, because Kaito kind of abandoned his squad to go get some glory kills, right? But beside the point, it gets to the end, and Kaito says something along the lines of like, "Do you know what I'm really thinking about, because of, you know, brother Captain so and so has died?" And the other sergeant says, basically says, no, I don't know, but you can confide in me. I think he makes a point of saying something along the lines of, "You can confide in me. I'm here for you. Tell me, brother, what's going on? What are you thinking?" And Kaito soullessly turns around and says, "I can't wait to see which one of us is going to take his position." Oh. And then this other sergeant just walks off in disgust, because Kaito is such a fuck-ass. You know?
I love
and
that.
These are the small scale stories. The character. This comes back to our point about internal conflict earlier when you're writing your homebrews. Internal conflict between your characters. Imagine writing two sergeants. How is it that these two Ultramarine sergeants, in what is ostensibly 3 pages of dialogue, have got so much more intrigue than most of the homebrews narrative stuff that I've read? And I'll tell you why. It's because A, it's character focus, and B, it's relatable character focus. It's on small scale. It's at the lower end of that established hierarchy. You know, it's really, again, if you're trying to do your homebrew as a state-based thing, probably not that interesting. But if you're looking to do narrative homebrew stuff, really look at the small guys. You know, it's a really interesting way of going about it.
Hell yeah.
Right, should we move on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So, number 14. Oh boy, was I ready to cook with this one. Misrepresenting or overusing rare resources. So, the abundance of rare or unique technology. Certain technologies or resources, e.g. Terminator armor, Blackstone, Necron artifacts. These are all incredibly rare in 40k. The Dark Angels, possessing so many suits of Terminator armor, is something unique to that chapter. It would take the combined power of at least 5 to 7 of their successors' first companies to form a Deathwing company, right? Giving a homebrew faction an unlimited supply of these materials without justification disrupts the scarcity and preciousness that makes these items significant in the lore in the first place.
So you're telling me I cannot give every single member of my warband a vortex grenade?
You can. I mean, we said at the start. This is just my opinion. This is just stuff that this is our opinions from experiences we've had from the time we spent reading the lore. The very final point, like number 20 on this list, is a fun one that's going to catch you all off guard because I bet a lot of the people watching this video will suffer from this one. And those who do number 20 or those who do number 20 or don't do number 20 in this case, I guarantee you are going to be much on average much better homebrewers than the rest because it's really important. But forgetting that for a minute. Or excessive access to technology, right?
Yeah.
So, relics, again, like Terminator armor or advanced weapons like Volkite or even Neo-Volkite. Even Neo-Volkite is rare, and chapters having an abundance of these without reason conflicts with, again, that established scarcity. And also, Xenotech.
Oh.
Xenotech. If I have to see another chapter, if I have to see another Master of Sanctity holding a Necron spear, I'm going to eat my shoes. I'm going to eat my shoes.
Like a chaplain of all people.
Say again?
A chaplain of all people to have that. Oh.
It's just, it's like, I mean, even a Master of the Forge having one, I'm sorry, it's like, it's cool in a model. And if you make a cool model with Xenotech, I will acknowledge that. I've done it 100 times in the Discord. I'll see someone post their model and they'll go, yeah, I just felt like putting this Necron blade on my Tech Marine. I'll be like, yeah, that looks fucking sick. That looks fucking awesome. But I'm not going to ask you about the lore behind it.
Yeah.
No, I'll acknowledge a cool fucking model, though. Like, 100%. Like, no cap. Absolutely. But the problem with Xenotech is, like, it's again, we come back to our previous point, number 8, misusing lore precedents. Someone will say, well, the Death Watcher allowed Xeno phase blades. Why can't I have? It's like, well, because it's rare as fuck. And I'll be honest, full disclaimer here, because I know if Red's watching this, and this is one of the episodes I think Red would take some interest in, he's going to say it. I have done this. I've made this mistake. I've made this mistake with my current homebrew. It's my favorite homebrew, and I've made this mistake. I am not infallible. I adore, I absolutely fucking love Votann weapons. I love Votann weapons. They look fucking amazing. So I put a Votann power fist on one of my fucking captains. Fucking love it. And I've just been running around saying it's some experimental AdMech fucking power fist, which is the most trite explanation one could imagine.
Well, Tom, here's the thing, and we've been saying this the whole time, is that with one of these iffy bits of homebrewing, one of the best things you can do is simply not say anything or imply, but don't say. Say, oh yeah, no, this was definitely, an ancient pattern of Power Gauntlet. It may have been found on Stygies, but,
well,
it's ours.
It may be one thing when it's a Votann weapon, because Votann weapons and Imperial weapons have a shit ton in common.
Very true.
It's a bit more different when we're dealing with Necron weapons, though. There's it's kind of hard to ignore the aesthetic when it looks like a scarab's about to crawl out of it.
Yeah,
we need
that iCarly meme of like what you got there, a smoothie. We need that of you, Tom, with the power fist behind you. What you got there, a smoothie.
I just love the Votann weapons, but there is the Votann Stormbolters are really interesting because with a little bit of green stuff filling to get rid of some of the stuff and some custom work, you can make them look like Imperial Stormbolters of a different variety. You can make them not look Votann coded. You can actually make them look Imperial coded. So If you're doing some kit bashing stuff, this is just a personal little thing from me. If you want some special storm bolters or power swords or power axes, look at the Votan stuff. It's not a stretch visually speaking. Maybe from a lore standpoint, you might have a rough time like I'm having, but visually speaking, it's what I said about putting Necron bits on Tech Marines and stuff. It's fucking cool. It's really fucking cool. Go ahead, do it. It looks awesome. You're just gonna have a tough time explaining it from a lore standpoint. But yeah, it's actually, maybe I should have put that in the disclaimer at the start. Don't let the lore get in the way of a good kit bash.
Hell yeah.
Don't let the lore get in the way of a good kit bash. You got an idea that's cool? Fucking do it. Don't even.
Well, GW is a models first company.
Yeah.
Lore follows models, and it's not a bad motto to live by.
No, absolutely. And I'll, you know what? Actually, I'll try and stand by that going forward. If someone has a homebrew and the homebrew's amazing, and the only problem is that the fucking Master of the Forge has a fucking Necron power spear, but his model looks sick, I'm gonna forgive it. I'm not gonna care. To be honest,
I'm a simple man.
You see this, guys? Character progression.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. You're right though. I see cool model. No problem. No problem at all. Right. Although I will say this here, because this is the misrepresenting or overusing rare resources, I will say 2 words. Gloriana class. If I have to see another homebrew with a Gloriana class, I'm going to kill Alex.
Enough said.
I am the only one here allowed to have one. I'm the World Eaters. We have one. Leave me alone.
That's why I have to kill you, because then they get yours. Every time someone homebrews a homebrew with a Gloriana class battleship, a World Eater player dies. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules.
Another World Eater joins the milking room.
Yeah, that's just how it goes, bro. No, it's the same thing. I saw a guy homebrew a Speranza class Arc Mechanicus Speranza ship, which is even which is even more mighty than a Gloriana. And his reasoning was, they're in the Imperium Nihilus, and in the Imperium Nihilus, the rules just ain't the same. And it's like, please kill me.
Bruh. That's a fucking Speranza. No, you can't be doing a fucking Speranza. I love and hate the Forges of Mars trilogy. I have an incredibly deep love-hate relationship with it. But the Speranza is a one-off. You can't be fucking duplicating the fucking Speranza.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, the Arc Mechanica Speranza is basically a fucking flying forge world with engines at the back.
And it may or may not have a semi-sentient machine spirit.
Yeah.
In full, on the level, if not exceeding that, of a Emperor-class Titan.
Almost as if it has like half an SEC in there, if only they know how to turn it on.
And it also has a secret black hole cannon that can come out the side, and it implies to also have other weapons on board that are similarly hidden and locked to the Dark Age. There should not be more than one.
Is that you, my beloved retro gun? Is that you on board?
Yeah. There's other things like that. We don't have to talk about them, but I'll list a few. Relic Terminator armor is a fun one. Primarch equipment is another fun one that seems to be getting around a lot these days. It's like, my chapter master, yes, his great-great-grandfather knew Lionel Johnson, and so he has Lionel Johnson's tennis shoes. And it's like...
One exception. That actually opens a thing.
Don't tell me it's about Lionel Johnson's tennis shoes.
No. So there is a good short story, I think it's about the Marines Malevolent, where there's a shrine world that has enshrined, apparently, a bolt pistol used by Rubuti Gilliman. Marines Malevolent come down, slaughter everyone, get to it, and they're supposed to hand the thing over to an Inquisitor, but then they destroy it, because it was actually one of, I think, Horus's bolt pistols.
Oh.
But if you're going to do a Primarch weapon, bolt pistols were used and discarded enough that it might make sense.
Oh, that's interesting, yes. And to be fair...
Don't say it, absolutely. Don't make it absolute, imply it. We don't know.
Actually, I'll tell this for kit bashing again. bolt pistols, especially the old school bolt pistols, are underused as fuck. Bolt pistols are one of the most visually awesome things in the setting. It's just a real shame that for the last, 4 editions, there's never been a reason to take a bolt pistol in a Space Marine.
Yeah.
Which is really sad.
If you get the new Horus Heresy Assault Upgrade Kit, they've got all the cool Heresy bolt pistols.
They've got the Tigris one, they've got the Phobos one. What's the other one they've got? They've got a third one.
Fucking...
It's going to come back to... I know.
Phobos?
No,
Tigris.
I said... Oh, God. It'll come back to us when we're doing the Patron questions.
Maximus? I don't know. That's the armor.
That's the armor, yeah. It's not a Godwin one. The Godwin came later, isn't it?
The Godwin is the standard one that we have.
Yeah. We'll come back to it. It's whatever. So, moving on. So, number 15. This is fun. And this one is, again, this was exclusively for you narrative homebrewers, or you homebrewers that include narrative stuff. And that's ignoring the role of time. So, disregarding long time frames, right? Warhammer 40k is set in a universe where events often unfold over centuries or millennia. Homebrew creators sometimes ignore this, right? Having characters or factions achieve major changes or developments unreasonably quick. In the 40k setting, patience, slow decay, or gradual evolution are more common than rapid transformation. And this actually comes back to something we touched upon earlier with people mimicking the Black Templars. One of the big reasons why they get away with having so many fucking Marines is because it's taken them 10,000 years to get here.
Yeah.
Your fucking ultimate founding successor, who has been floating around for the last 100 years, or if that, or whatever, you're not telling me they've been on crusade since they were created, and therefore they have, it's just... I think we're beating a dead horse with this point, actually. I think they understand.
Yeah.
Again, come back to the disclaimer. I'm not your dad. You can homebrew how you want. I guess I'm finding out about Urks that I didn't realize I had. Or Urks that were larger than I thought they were.
Yeah, actually, I saw a good interview. Guys, it's gonna kill me that I don't remember which designers it was, but 2 of the original GW designers for the setting. I think they were talking about Rick Priestley.
Yeah.
And in the original conception of 40k, it was imagined that it would actually take centuries to travel from one side of the galaxy to the other.
Oh, like
this
Star
is
Trek.
kind of... Yeah. But you need to stop bringing that up, Tom.
You
It's gone now.
It's
gone now, Tom. It's gone. It's
your
over.
fault.
It's not your fault, Tom. It's not your fault.
No, you're right. It's your fault.
But in the original conception of the setting, it would take hundreds of years to cross the galaxy. And this, of course, has changed as time's gone on.
Yeah.
But there's something very important to remember about travel, because this is another thing that ties in with time, is how dangerous travel is, and how what's the word? I'm going to scream. Superstitions arise
yes,
surrounding warp travel, and what preparations different groups will make. This is an excellent way to talk about the fleet culture of your chapter.
Yeah.
Because your chapter has a fleet, and the culture of those crew may be distinct from the chapter of their homeworld.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't tell me that there at some point there were probably 13,000 Black Templars. Somebody sneezed a little too loud next to an Asabat, and now there are 12,000.
Yeah.
They just lost the fleet.
It's really interesting that concept though about culture, because it's the difference between, and you wouldn't think about it when you're homebrewing fantasy or sci-fi until you make this comparison, but it's the difference between an Englishman and an English sailor. Those two are not the same fucking thing. You know what I mean? Those two motherfuckers are not the same bastard. It's the difference between, an American and someone in the Navy. That's a spicy difference. The culture of spending your life traveling from port to port. Yeah, you'll have echoes of your planetary culture. And like you said with the time, and it happening over generations, because the thing as well, whole generations will be born and die on these ships. Mm-hmm. And your Space Marines will see those generations be born and die on these ships.
Yeah.
The whole cycle of life, it's a whole fucking ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a fun one to play into it as well. Yeah, I suppose that's another reason why there's a fun character you can homebrew that everyone forgets about. I haven't forgotten about, because I talk about him too much. And that's a homebrewing a Master of the Fleet.
Yep.
The homebrewers used to do it a lot, actually, in the like 4th edition era and 3rd edition area. People would homebrew Masters of the Fleet.
Well, that's because the Master of the Fleet had a dedicated model.
Oh, of course. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yep.
That makes sense. But yeah, a Master of the Fleet is a fun one. If I recall correctly, some Masters of the Fleet aren't... I might be wrong, actually. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but not all chapters have a Space Marine Master of the Fleet anymore, do they?
Correct. Because
Yeah, I believe they do have Mortal Masters.
That's a fun one. That's a really fun one if you want to throw in one mortal character who has to interact with your chapters, the upper echelon of your chapter's hierarchy.
Yeah,
on the
ownership of ships has recently kind of changed in the last couple editions, like in the last 5, 6, 7 years of the lore, where ownership of fleets and ownership of ships is... Even when a Space Marine chapter has a ship, they will probably have one ship gifted by another chapter, or maybe like a successor or a local force world. But then the rest of their fleet will consist of rogue traders, of naval commanders, of even hired ships at times within Imperial hired standards. Because ships are now, over time, being seen more and more as also, it's a thing that usually a human owns and is used by the Space Marines. And indeed, like in recent time, most shipmasters and even fleet masters and things are all humans. It's just that, of course, they will listen to their Space Marine lords because they're the angels of death. They're his sons.
It's like landlords.
Yeah.
It's like landlords. 50 years ago, everyone had their own one now. Now the Space Marines are all renting them out. They can't get their own anymore.
It's like...
Though, to be fair, in Chaos, Space Marines do tend to be the captain still.
Yeah.
That tends to be a theme with Chaos.
That's kind of the thing, like, now when it comes to being a landlord as, like, a rogue trader stuff, but instead of having a normal person living in your house, it's Jesus. So, of course you're going to listen to him.
It's several Jesuses. They're huge.
It's about 1,000 of them.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. Right, shall we... Oh, go on.
Actually, one finer point, specifically for fleet stuff. And this is something that not every Space Marine homebrewer might be aware of, because it leans into more like mortal lore.
Sure.
Is the presence of Voidborn.
Yes.
And this is a subtle detail that may or may not come up, but it's important to consider. You may have heard the term Voidborn thrown around by some people sometimes. It's often mentioned in books. But it doesn't often get recognized properly. And Voidborn is essentially just the title given to people who usually are generations of their family, have been born and died in space.
Yeah.
And from that, they've gotten a little bit different from the human genetic norm.
Yeah.
Generally, this tends to be slightly longer limbs, sort of gravity deprivation on occasion.
Yeah.
Tend to have grayer skin because they have no natural sunlight. Other features like that, sometimes teeth are a little misaligned or slightly different shape. And there's a very interesting short story in the Warhammer Crime series about when some Voidborn from a visiting fleet come down to the world Electo, and when they go to a bar because they just want to get a drink, relax, they're actually beaten up, killed, and then burned at the stake because the local people were so terrified of mutants. And that's something to keep in mind.
Yep.
Is the culture on your ship and your ships may not get along with local imperial populaces.
Yeah.
That's something you should know if you don't already know.
Well, it's such a great point because it flies all the way back around to our number 10 point, which is, overlooking internal conflict. Because there's again, no names, there's a guy in the Discord who has a really well fleshed out homebrew, Space Marine homebrew, and he's clearly put an awful lot of effort into describing their serfdom and how their serfdom works. But it's also, their serfdom is also extremely idyllic. And I think maybe that's a point of work he may want to look at. He's a good homebrewer. Lots of respect for him. I know that Red's not fond of his homebrew, but I like his homebrew. If your homebrew impresses Red, you've cracked the code, honestly. But I think that's the thing as well. If you're going to put the effort into writing about your chapter's serfdom, then that internal conflict and those differences, and again the role of time, the role of chaos and corruption, the roles of mutation and acceptance, etc. It all plays a factor because again, it's not just an extra subculture; it's an extra ecosystem existing on the back of the shark that is your Space Marines. Right? Shall we move on?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Hell yeah.
So, number 16.
Burger Bing cheeseburgers.
Number 16. Not acknowledging the impact of psychic powers.
Oh.
So, underplaying the consequences of psychers. Psychic powers in Warhammer 40k come with significant dangers. From possession by demons to catastrophic warp phenomena. Some homebrew content treats psychers as purely advantageous, ignoring the inherent risks and consequences of wielding such powers, which just fucking undermines the role in the lore. Their role in the lore as unpredictable and perilous things. And actually, I'm going to talk about something now. Zarrek and I together, Zarrek, we are in a joint Deathwatch campaign, aren't we?
Mm-hmm, we are.
We play Deathwatch characters. Zarrek is an apothecary, and I am a tactical marine. Alex, would you like to guess what Aaron is in this campaign?
Well, seeing as the context of the conversation, I'm going to go for a librarian.
You are correct. Our beloved Aaron is a librarian.
Sweet.
And Aaron, being the full steam ahead kind of guy that he is, likes to go all the way with his psychic powers. When we use the word perils.
How many perils?
It is really quite spectacular. You know, psychers and librarians are dangerous as fucking hell. And this is the thing I've noticed, a lot of people like to make very psycho-heavy chapters, typically Blood Angel successors, or sometimes even Ultramarine successors, funnily enough. But then there will not be any mention. I've had this before again as well, where I've read a homebrew document where it's a Blood Angel successor, and it seems really cool, and they've got a really psycho-heavy presence. They've got this awesome, fleshed-out master of, chief librarian, right?
Yeah.
And there's no mention anywhere of anything going wrong with their psychers and their librarians. No mention of any warp fuckery. No mention of an fucking librarian or Codicia blowing himself up because he chanted the wrong incantation or farted at the wrong time when he was casting his fucking spell of summon Earl Grey tea or what have you.
Or how many got possessed during a demonic incursion.
Yeah. It's like psychers and librarians, shit going wrong with librarians in battle, that shit happens all the fucking time. There is a reason why during the Horus Heresy, up until like near the end, Rogel Dawn, between the Council of Nicaea and the Siege of Terra, Rogel Dawn took all of the psychers in the Imperial Fist's Legion and shoved them all in a room and told them to stay there, and they stayed there for years, because having librarians around is risky as fuck. So if you write this awesome chief librarian, he's got all these powers, and it's so badass, it's so cool. It's like, I love this. But your psycho-heavy chapter, your librarian-heavy chapter has no written history of things going wrong, or God forbid we come back to our other point about mutations and superficial downsides. Their things going wrong only adds to their pixie girl quirkiness. It's like, it's really painful to read, because I'm sat here and I'm liking what I'm reading. I'm liking, and I like it more knowing about the downsides. You know, writing weaknesses is a weakness in word only. In every other facet, it's great.
Mm-hmm. And on a character level as well, something to really consider if you're going in for the more individual level, is the fact that in most chapters, a librarian does not ever get to hold an office of command.
Yeah.
And for very good reason.
Yep.
We see why in Dawn of War 2.
We do, even though that was a cornate thing, which shouldn't work.
Don't worry about it. There are cornate psychers, we just, they're edge cases. But that's a really compelling thing for a character, is this character, as soon as they're an aspirant, and as soon as they're screened for psychic proficiency, and they're found to be psychically proficient, that's it. That Marine, hell, at age 14 or something, knows from that point on that he can never hold an office of command, and he will always be subordinate to his brothers.
Yep. I think it's like an always a little story I'd like to tell that is in the 40k lore about how dangerous is a psyker really, right? Like I think a lot of people underestimate how dangerous even a singular psyker left alone on a world can be. So we have a story that I don't fully remember which edition it is, but it is the story of this noble and he has a daughter. And his daughter is a psyker, not a very powerful one. She just has minor psychic abilities. She has the power of kinetic force. She can lift things up with her mind. Awesome. At some point, the Sisters of Silence come by with the black ships, and they get the entire supply of psychers from the entire planet. The noble lies to them and hides his daughter away. Within 3 weeks, she gets an infection. She gets physically sick. She looks like she's about to die at this point, her flesh almost slotting off. And as she about dies, her body starts to rumble. And she opens up in a word that is called a fleshgate, which is an awful word to say. But a fleshgate and 3 enslavers step out. Within 24 hours, the planet of about 2 trillion inhabitants is completely enslaved by these enslavers. This is the thing about one singular psyker not being picked up correctly can result in an entire planet falling apart before the black ship even left the system.
Yep.
That's how fast it can go if someone doesn't pay attention and does not get the proper training. So even the best librarians, when they open up their minds to full psychic might, we see this with Mephiston when he casts the Red Lance into the Tyrannid Hive Fleet. He's still struggling. He literally collapses the moment he lands and almost dies right there and then. Because opening up so much power, whether it be physical force you have to exert to do it, or mental force you have to do it, everybody can get corrupted almost instantly. Because we said earlier, Chaos is very good at what it does. You open up your soul to the warp, the sea of souls, it can just rip it apart at any moment. If you get the wrong attention at the wrong moment where you cast any kind of warp blast at somebody, maybe you give them itchy pants. Like, I cast tungsten ballsack, right? Like, that might be it. That moment of you doing that, maybe a small distraction, seeing your brother die while you're holding a spell, can be enough. You might implode, you might explode, you might take your entire chapter with you, or you might take the entire system with you if you're unlucky enough and start a warp storm.
Yeah. I think coming back to the point about homebrewing, though.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. It's cool. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I think just bringing it back to the point of homebrewing, though, is there is one of these common mistakes we're talking about is a surprising lack of caution when writing characters or writing psycho-heavy homebrew chapters. It happens a lot, and it's cool. We love librarians, we love psychers, and we like the psycho-heavy chapters, you know.
Yeah.
But psychers are imperfect in the setting. They're dangerous. They are cool as hell, but make sure you're adequately depicting that danger. You know, that's it. That's all you have to do. That it's really easy. It's really easy to do. It's just that when you forget to do it, your chapter goes into the realm of disbelief. You know?
Yeah.
But it's very easy to do. And it's fun as well, because again, you can write a little thing about how I don't know, brother Psychus Maximus fucking accidentally summoned Throng the Destroyer when he thought too hard and tensed too hard. You know, it's a fun little tidbit. And again, this adds into the same thing before about taking losses, how taking losses can add narrative intrigue. You can write a psyker. Your psyker is there to be the guinea pig that shows that your chapter isn't perfect with the warp, because no one is. And he uses his psychic ability. And Throng the Destroyer of Khorne shows up, and boom, now all his brothers who knew him have this ancient vengeance against not only Throng the Destroyer, but any worshippers of Khorne. So again, you've got another avenue to add to your chapter's narrative and their goals, their motives.
Yeah.
It's just so fucking easy, and it does so much heavy lifting for you, you know? Shall we move on to number 17?
Let's get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's a fun one that happens way more than it should. This is one of the ones I will talk about with a little bit of angry teacher kind of fucking vibes, even though this is all just opinion, yada yada, not your father, etc. So many people, so many homebrewers, forget, so number 17, forget the impact of religion in 40k and homebrewing Space Marines. So downplaying religion's role. In Warhammer 40k, particularly within the Imperium, religion plays an utterly crucial role. The ecclesiarchy, the cult mechanicus, the various other faiths shape the lives and actions of countless individuals, ignoring or diminishing the role of religious influence in a faction or character, especially human ones, undermines the atmosphere and, well, the fanaticism and spiritual control that defines not just the Imperium, but the setting in general, right? So many Space Marine chapters are not as religious as the Black Templars. But they are religious. They will have some kind of faith. There will be faith ingrained in them all. When you write your chapter's creed or cult, just remember, the Emperor's still a god. The Primarchs are still holy beings. Your Space Marines are still angels. You know, even the most basic English terminology used to influence and create Warhammer 40k as a fictional setting leans impossibly heavily on Abrahamic religious terminology. It is so much a part of the setting. So don't forget about it. Don't not write about it. Your Space Marine, your favorite Space Marine, he's religious. He might not be as religious as Grimoldus, but trust me, he's religious. You know,
even though a lot of people will say Space Marines aren't religious, yada yada yada, they don't believe in the Emperor as the God Emperor. They do. They do say the Emperor protects. Yeah. They understand it, and chaplains at this point, even though he might not be seen as a god as we understand it as like normal Abrahamic, but he will be a warrior god to them.
Yeah,
it is genetic god as well, and that is the part about it. There's always a super heavy undertone of religion in no matter what any homebrew should need, because it's just a part of the setting.
Yeah, and it's the thing as well. This extends beyond Space Marines. This is all Imperial homebrewing. Whether you are homebrewing Imperial Guardsmen, I was about to say Sisters of Battle, but if you're doing Sisters of Battle without religion, you are doing it wrong. You know,
you're just doing Feeble Guardsmen at that point.
You're just. So it's like, you know, but religion is so important. When you're writing your chapter's creed or cult, it doesn't necessarily have to be like hyper religious in practice as the ecclesiarchy or imperial cult, but you're going to want imperial terminology in there when you write it. If you end up writing your equivalent of the Ten Commandments or your chapter's code of ethics or whatever you want to call it, your fucking OSHA guidelines for the fucking Marines bingus, you should be using religious terminology. You have to, because their cult and their creed is going to be their religion. It's going to be what defines them as individuals of faith. Marines use, I think Alex kind of touched upon it, Marines use religious terminology all the fucking time. They are raised to use religious terminology. It is, have faith, brother. The fact that they all call each other brother is more than just a familial thing. Brother is what priests call other priests in monasteries. There is a reason that the Gregorian monk theme has been so prevalent in Warhammer 40k for the last 35 years. Real world religion and real world religious terminology goes hand in hand with Warhammer 40k. And if you're writing your homebrew, whether it's narrative or a sort of a state-based homebrew, it needs it. It's crazy because, again, I've said this before. I've said this several times this episode where I've read a homebrew and gone, wow, this is cool. And I'm being sat there and I'm thinking, something's missing. What the fuck is missing? And I'll get to the end. It's like, the Emperor hasn't been mentioned once. Why is the Emperor not being mentioned? Isn't that crazy? But that's the truth. The Emperor is their god. He is their grandfather. He is their Space Wolves call him the fucking All-Father. I think I'm beating the horse a little bit now.
Yeah.
No.
Well, one more detail just to add on to that. In particular, is if you're doing renegades or space marines that have turned to chaos.
Yes.
It's important to consider the ramifications here, because all loyalist space marines undergo hypno indoctrination.
Nice one.
So it's very important. Thank you. It's very important to consider what breaks that. What would it take to break it? What would it take to strain it for a loyalist character? What things could they learn that would test their faith? Because Tests of Faith are traditionally a very sisters-oriented
Yeah.
storyline. But there's plenty of times that Space Marines have gone through it as well. And it's a really good, like, classic narrative that you can follow if you're not really sure what way to go with your typical heroic character.
Yeah.
Crisis of Faith.
Yep.
There is a reason why... I'm trying to remember the book, but I can't remember. But there is a reason why when the Ultramarines had to work alongside the Tau very briefly to fight Chaos, there is a reason why an Ultramarine said to a Firecast that he needed to have faith. That his guns were useless in comparison to faith.
Yep.
You know, that's... And this is an Ultramarine we're talking about. We're not talking about Johnny Religion, Black Templar. We're talking about, you know, the utilitarians. Yeah. It's key. It's core. It's, you know, it's part of the setting. And if you're not sold on it, if you're still not convinced, take a look at the 3rd edition artwork. It's
Yep.
oozing with religious imagery. Absolutely bloodied in it. Right, moving on. Let's go to number 18. Oh, this is a fun one as well. This is one where we gotta talk about the naughty boys and girls who really misunderstand this one. And that is number 18, Misunderstanding the Role of the Inquisition.
Oh.
So, too much or too little Inquisition involvement. The Inquisition is a powerful force, but it doesn't involve itself in every event. Some homebrew creators either ignore the Inquisition entirely, you know, when their faction or actions should attract attention. We're looking at you, people with mutations. Or involve the Inquisition excessively when characters constantly, interact with them. Striking a balance where the Inquisition's influence is felt but not omnipresent is key. Remember, Space Marines answer to the Inquisition optionally. The Inquisition commands total authority, but Space Marines have total autonomy.
Yep.
Yeah? So there's a really funny balance that needs to be struck here. Now, we could turn around and you could say, well, my chapter are like the Minotaurs. My chapter do the dirty work of the Inquisition or the High Lords in this case, or whoever, whatever. You know, unless you're doing a homebrewed Ordo militant, your chapter will always look at the Inquisition and go, fuck, why are they here?
Yep.
You know, unless you're creating an Ordo militant, there is no homebrew that is going to see the Inquisition rock up and be happy about it. You know, Space Marines are... well, maybe, again, you know, I'm not your father. Maybe your chapter loves the Inquisition turning up. Maybe they fucking adore that shit. I don't know. But, you know...
What's that one chapter? The Red something.
Oh, the Red Hunters.
It's the Red Hunters.
That's the one.
Oh, there you go. There they are. They've shown up. You know, I thought you were about to say The Exorcist for a minute then. I was about to throw a book at you. That definitely not. Those guys couldn't get further away from the Inquisition. No, so, you know, the Inquisition, generally speaking, is bad for fucking everyone. Are they necessary? Yes. Are they terrible? Also, yes. You know, but the Inquisition are too often, again, my opinion, in homebrewing, the Inquisition are too often used as a solve-all, fix-all plot device, a McGuffin or a plot device to move narratives along when narratives were doing just fine in their absence, or, you know, the same as the point I just made, coming and going. It's difficult. The Inquisition is one of the coolest things about the setting. You know, the Inquisition in 40k has inspired so many other orders in fictional and science fiction settings.
Yeah.
They are the epitome of brutal. What was the phrase? The innocent, guilty one? What was the quote?
Oh, fuck.
Innocence proves nothing.
That was it. Innocence proves nothing. That shit just goes hard. You know what I mean? That shit just goes way too fucking hard. So when you're creating your homebrew, unless you're creating an Ordo militant, which I think is a really cool thing to do, by the way, it's really fucking hard. It's really fucking hard. It's not hard to do. It's hard to flesh out. But, you know, unless you're making an Ordo militant, I think you got to really tread carefully with the Inquisition. Isn't that funny? Because in the setting, you encounter the Inquisition, you have to tread carefully. When you're writing the Inquisition, you should still tread carefully.
Yeah,
their reputation transcends their own setting.
So I recently was working on a Eisenhorn video, and in this came a quote that like stuck with me: "Is my power is limitless, unlike my patience." As he turns to a older High Inquisitor, it's horrifying how powerful these guys are.
Yeah. And that's the fun part as well, because that power will go to their head.
Oh, yeah.
And even though they know Space Marines are autonomous, it's kind of hard to care when you've had ultimate power for several centuries, because Inquisitors typically live for several centuries.
Yep.
You know, so it's a really tough balance to strike. You might say, well, the easiest thing to do is to just not talk about them. An easy fix, if you want to not talk about them, is just have a little addendum in your homebrew document somewhere about interactions with the Inquisition your chapter has had, and just keep them short and sweet. Just little things here and there, you know. It's an easy way out if you want to opt out of the perils of this, but I would encourage you not to. I would encourage you to use them, but use them sparingly, because, again, when it comes to creating narratives, we say, "Oh wow, look how good it is when you use the small guys." Well, when you use the big guys and you want big character conflict between two big guys, you're going to find a harder time finding someone who's interesting, powerful, and conflictious than an Inquisitor. Shall we move on to number 19? We are nearing the end.
Let's get it.
This one we can get through very fast, and I'm thinking of like two people when I mention this one. I know it's going to affect a bunch of you, but I'm thinking about two people I know personally. So number 19, overcomplicating names and terminology. The overuse of complex or alternative terminology. While Warhammer 40k thrives on Baroque and Gothic naming conventions, some homebrew creators go too far, creating names that are names and titles that are overly complex, difficult to pronounce, or filled with too many titles, making your content hard to engage with. Balance is needed between grandiose names and readability. Not to mention, over the last 40 years, the setting has set down precedents, and as we're talking about Space Marines again, has set down precedents for what can be expected. You know, if you want to change, and I'll tell you what can be expected to be changed, right, when we're overcomplicating or changing names. Chapter Master is a title. The title Chapter Master varies more than you think. Most are probably called Chapter Master, but often or not, it's either, you know, what am I thinking? The Red Scorpions call their Chapter Master Lord Commander. It's not Chapter Master Bingus, it's Lord Commander Bingus, right? And there's dozens of other examples as well, right? So even though they'll still be referred to externally as the Chapter Master of X, internally they'll be referred to as this. But what you don't want to do, thinking about you right there, Mr. Man listening to this, who's done it, you do not want to rename every single fucking title in your homebrew faction. I read a homebrew once, and again, I'm not going to go into detail because you'll know I'm talking about you. He renamed every single rank and title to some overcomplicated shit, and then proceeded to refer to his Space Marines in those alternative names throughout the rest of the document. I'm quite good. I read through fucking everything that gets submitted. I have read over 100 fucking homebrews this year, right? That is one of maybe 10 homebrews I've put down very quickly, because I needed a key, I needed a legend, I needed a fucking index on my separate monitor to come back to work out what title is he referring to every single time I got further down the document. I'm bitching so hard right now. I remember talking to, was it Moots or Red? One of them about this homebrew. And do you know what the crazy thing was?
What?
I only got a third of the way through the homebrew until I realized this was the shtick. That third was pretty fucking good.
Oh, it was a good for homebrew too. No,
it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. But don't do that. Don't do that. If you want to change the name of a few things, maybe the titles, the captains. We got precedents for that. The names of companies, right? Take the Emperor's Spears. They've got fucking war chiefs, right, for their companies and shit like that. That's fine, but pick and choose. If you are renaming fucking everything, at that point, don't ever expect anyone to read your homebrew or look through it. At that point, accept that it's only for you. Yeah. No one's going to do it.
I think a point for best practice there is you can have those titles, but maybe keep them to just dialogue, because that
Yes.
way it implies something about the chapter culture that they have these different names, whilst also keeping it readable for everyone else.
Yeah, well, look at what the Space Wolves do. We know that Space Wolf chapter masters, we all know the alternative ranks and things. But here's a fun one, actually. Those alternative ranks, we all know them because we've been exposed to it for so long. And if the Space Wolves weren't a real chapter, and they were introduced to us as a homebrew today, we'd look at that and say, that's fucking stupid.
Yep.
We would. The word wolf in fucking everything. We'd say it's absolutely tremendously silly. But because they've been around for 40 years... we've all learned to love them a little bit, but we don't have the capacity to learn to love something like that again.
Yeah,
you know, we don't.
I'm sorry, Wolf Lord Wolf-Salot. You're too wolfy for me.
Actually, a lot of us don't love them. I know a shitload of 40k fans who fucking hate the Space Wolves. Oh my god, they can't stand them. Holy crap, the Space Wolves. I honestly think the Space Wolves are the most hated legion
at the moment. Yeah,
I really think so. I think maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago wasn't the case. Now, I think honestly the Space Wolves fall from grace. I know there's going to be someone commenting or typing in the little chat bar on the side here that they love the Space Wolves, and that's fine. I get it. I actually do get it. Aesthetically, from a kit bashing standpoint, Space Wolves are fucking awesome.
Every time you post a Space Wolves short and you genuinely make one of the best shorts you've ever made, you're so proud of it. The moment it has a Space Wolf in it, half the performance.
Yeah. That's a really interesting one. Yeah, that's a funny metric that you can look at. Yeah, whenever you or I do shorts on the Space Wolves, they just do worse.
This is
people just see the Space Wolves at the start, or they'll see a Space Wolf talking, or they'll hear the title or the caption is about Space Wolves.
And they're like, nope.
And they'll just check out. They'll just leave straight away. It's really funny that. But yeah, no. Right, should we talk about the final point, number 20?
Oh, see what you've got saved up.
Not reading any source material.
Oh. So true. Pop off, King.
Use more than just the wikis and YouTube videos. Read books, read compendiums, read codexes, get PDFs online. They're really easy to find. They cost nothing. It's not hard. You know, some Discords, not ours because we're above board, but some Discords will have just whole collections of these things. You can ask anyone. They're really not hard to find. You know, read these things that will characterize chapters similar to what you want to make. You know, get first-hand reading done, or audiobooks. The Horus Heresy audiobooks. Oh, for the love of, the devastation of Baal. Gosh, all of it. The fucking Son of the Forest is amazing. It's all great. Just get first-hand experiences. There's so much fluff in the codexes. There's so much fluff in the codexes to read, The Imperial Armor Compendiums as well, the PDFs. Don't try and find some of the older ones online. They'll cost you thousands. But, they're really, really great. And, whilst the Lex or Lexicanum, I know some of you are thinking, oh, yeah, I get my lore from the Lex because it quotes its sources. It still gets things wrong a lot of the time. It really does. Yep. And when it doesn't get things wrong, it still grossly oversimplifies them. Trust the Lex for, fucking, bare minimum shit. But I promise you, I said it earlier, if you do this last thing, or not do this last thing in this case, you will just be a better homebrewer. I mean it. If you're reading source material, you will have so much more understanding, so much more inspiration. And to be honest, you don't need to sit there and read books. I know a lot of you struggle with reading whole books or struggle trying to get through audiobooks. Do you know what my way of getting around that was before I finally got into the routine of reading books every night? I put fucking codexes in the bathroom. I put codexes in the bathroom. I'd go and take a dump, and I'd read some fluff about the Iron Hands. That's what I would do. Just put them somewhere where you're going to be able to, oh, hello, here's a little thing. Just doing little bits here and there. It helps a lot. Please, please, please. Not reading any source material is hugely, colossally, massively detrimental to... it's not detrimental, but those of you who do it will have such an edge on those who don't.
Yep.
It makes so much difference. And if you can't read, audiobooks. And if you can't read and you can't hear,
I don't think they're watching, Tom.
I don't think you're watching. Yeah. Sorry, that's unfortunate. God bless. Yeah, I don't know what else to say on this point. Honestly, I don't think there's anything else to say. Really, it's hard to go on.
I have a personal request for anyone listening who wants to know more about something in 40k. and it's to find the 5th edition codex for it. They go for like £6. You can get them so cheap. It's really good. Maybe skip the Space Marine one though. Get like 3rd edition or 7th edition. Skip 5th for Space Marines, but get 5th edition codex for anything else.
Yeah. The main thing why you should read, no matter whether. Maybe you're watching this right now, and you're not actually that much of a homebrewer, but you were just interested to see what kind of tips would I need if I would want to start homebrewing. The reason you want to start reading 40k lore, like the actual books, the codexes and things like that, is you understand how 40k writers write. So when you finally write for yourself, when you write your own chapter, you can write it in a style that is along the lines of normal 40k writing, meaning your homebrew feels like it fits in, not in just what you wrote, the little details you added, the character quirks you gave it, but also how you wrote it, the vibe of the text, what words did you use, because understanding 40k vocabulary, you're not going to get that from the wiki, you're not going to get that from the lexicanum, and you don't even get that from Luton most of the time, because that's just the way content creation is. But when it comes to genuinely understanding how a well-written story is made, read 40k books. They are the best example for almost any franchise.
Yeah, and not all 40k books are good.
No, they're not all made
some
equal.
Some of them are mid. A lot of them are mid. But to be honest,
look for recommendations.
Yeah. Speak to people. If you say to someone, "Hey, listen, I really like insert chapter," someone will have like a book, unless the chapter you're picking is the fucking Hawk Lords, in which case, get fucked, I suppose.
Don't read Wrath of Iron. Please don't read Wrath of Iron. I made that mistake. I'm sorry, whoever recommended that to me. It was the worst book I've ever read.
It's the same for all the other factions as well. It's absolutely the same. Chaos Space Marines. Go read the fucking Lords of Silence.
Oh,
Go read the Huron Blackheart book.
Night or something.
Go read the Fabius Bile book. Same for the Custodes, the Watchers of the Throne stuff.
Oh, that's so
the Inquisition. Cool. There's so much stuff out there, and you can go further back if you really want that Baroque vibe. Look at some of the older, higher-rated books. Some of that shit from a long time ago is fucking. I want to say esoteric, but it's creepy. The dialogue choices are just they just crawl under your skin. It's great.
I've got hold on. I have something on my shelf.
Zarrek is going to the mythical shelf. So anyone who doesn't know, I've known Zarrek for several years now. Zarrek has a shelf containing, by all accounts, every Warhammer 40k book known to man and beyond.
It's only about 40%.
Only 40%. Only 40%. Do you know only 40% of the fucking Library of Alexandria?
Yeah, only 40% of like 700. That's still problematic, Zarrek.
Tom, if you want, you can post a photo. You can post the photo of my shelf.
You could build a fort out of what's on your shelf.
Right. I have some recommendations for anyone who wants good classic 40k short stories.
Let's start with the Space Marines. We're a very Space Marine thing
absolutely.
going on,
I can help with that. So, first of all, short stories I think are the best way to get into 40k fiction. They're short. You can read them in like 20, 30 minutes. If you're just on a commute or something, and you're not driving, you can pick up a book and you can just read a short story. The one for Space Marines I'd recommend is, funnily enough, the short story collection Space Marines. I have it right here. Got it from a local charity shop for, I think, like £5 or £6. Brilliant. It's like, how many pages here? Oh, it's got a comic at the end. Cool. It's about 900 pages long.
Oh, wow.
But it contains, let's see here, about, I'd say 25, 30 short stories.
Oh, that's great.
And they all have different chapters.
That's amazing, yeah.
They've got also, I think, and it lists, in this book, it lists which chapter each short story is about. So if you like, say, what is Death Watch one here? If there's a particular, chapter you like, hell, even if it's a heretic warband, yeah, we've got the Sons of Malice short story in here. It's brilliant. It's a great thing.
But this is the thing as well, right? Because you can use this, and this isn't just for your reading enjoyment, right? Again, bringing it back to homebrewing, if you're making a successor chapter that is a certain way, you are going to have canon chapters that you're drawing inspiration from.
Yeah.
this is how you find out how to write them. This is how you find out what their core elements are made of, you know. And your first-hand reading experience, it will trump anything that you'll read on a wiki. It will trump anything a fucking YouTuber will tell you, you know. It'll trump anything the gaming storyteller tells you, honestly. You know.
I feel personally attacked. Hold up.
I think you were personally attacked, to be fair.
I mean, yeah, but that's the thing, right? This is the most important thing. I think a lot of people forget this, and at the end I should throw this in. Even when a YouTuber tells you how to do homebrewing and things, there's only so much time in a video. There's only so much you can say. A lot of the nuance will in the end like fall off it. There's only so much you can put in a script. 4,000 words ain't that much when you're covering a book with 500 pages. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And as I think the point Zarrek was trying to make as well is, you'll enjoy it. You get stuck into something, you know. You ever had that, like, I know some people didn't like it, but to those other people who did like Son of the Forest, or the audio book for Son of the Forest, it's really special. And you got the Horus Heresy as well. You know, I tell you what, even if the Horus Heresy won't help you with 40k lore because it's so long ago, it will help you with humanizing Space Marines, Space Marine dialogue, Space Marine narratives. Horus Heresy will help with that tons. Yeah. I think we've covered it all. I think we've got the lot. Does anyone have any last minute tidbits they'd like to throw out about what not to do with homebrewing? Should we do a what to do with homebrewing, 20 homebrewing tips at some point?
Yes, we should.
Yeah, we'll try and not rehash the same points. I'll keep a hold of this notes document. Any tips? Any last little tiddly bits out there?
Honestly, when choosing your color scheme, because I always see so many people ask, "Oh, what kind of color scheme should I have on my models? Like, what should I do for my homebrew? I'm thinking like orange. I'm thinking like red." Just go buy a little set of like 5 Astartes. Go paint them up, do them in all different colors, and you're gonna have some colors in your range. Like I always say, "Oh, I'm not gonna use purple in this army," and there I am, sitting there painting my Gene Stealer purple like a good little boy, every single time. Because I love painting purple. That's for me the color. Everybody has that one color they always end up putting in an army, even when you don't mean to.
Yeah.
And
well, it's like me with the color magenta. I will always come back to magenta or pink, no matter what I'm doing. It'll always make its way in there somehow.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just paint some minis and go with something that you like. Maybe you see a really cool color scheme from like one of the Horus Heresy schemes or stuff like that. Experiment. Just have fun with it. And you can always still strip your models and just paint them again until you find a homebrew scheme that works the best. Because seeing it in real life on a miniature is always going to give you the exact vision of what you're actually going to get when you do an entire army, instead of doing digital painting and stuff like that.
Yeah. Right. Patron questions. Should we do some Patron questions?
Let's do some Patron questions.
Woo! Let's go.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of the Astartes Anonymous podcast. If you're enjoying our content and want to see your head on the wall behind me, or if you just want to help out, please consider taking a quick look at our Patreon. And if you want the opportunity to interact with myself or any of the other members of the team, jump into our Discord, link down below. Thanks for watching. Right, I'm going to fade out on Zarrek's little woo. Keep recording. I'm going to go and empty my bladder, and then we'll do Patron questions. I'll be back in a minute. Just keep recording, please.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
This man said to me that this was going to be an hour-long podcast. We are now 3 hours in. And I don't see... Oh, it's been so long. I was holding my back so hard, thinking about because I used to do Lost Legion homebrewing. That's what I started off with.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's what you're meant to do. It's what it's there for.
Yeah, honestly, right? Like, for the what to do, I would always put in that suggestion because it's a little. I almost find 40k homebrewing to be harder than 30k homebrewing, because in 30k there is a definite endpoint when that legion disappears. So you have a lot less space to do, and they were allowed to be a little more crazy, because of the genetic defects and things. But a good homebrew chapter or a good homebrew retinue or even just a good homebrewed sergeant, oh, that shit's so good. And having a person that's actually passionate about it, get a couple art pieces with that character, get a couple good conversions with that, maybe even have some 3D sculpted parts for it.
Dude,
So
I wish I
good.
could afford a commission. Holy shit.
What I wouldn't do.
Fucking real.
Right, are we still recording?
We are still
Yes.
recording.
Patron question time. So,
All right.
we haven't actually had any new ones since our last recording.
Oh.
So, there is one, though, that wasn't done that I really like and is a little bit relevant to this episode. And because it's only the one, we'll spend a little bit more time on it.
Sure.
Sounds good.
And this is from Ober. Ober, or Oberonson. And Ober asks, you can create your own minor faction in 40k with an army and several heroes. What archetype would you want them to be, as in basic lore, tactics / style of play?
Oh, I've got a fucking answer for you, Tom. I've got a bloody answer.
Ready to go. Go on.
So I got one. I've been sitting on this. I'll fish out the art piece for references, but there is a particular art piece in the 9th edition core rulebook, which is like a sort of it's one of those multi-part art pieces they do with a bunch of mini artworks. Inside
I know the
frame.
one. I know the one.
I love those so much. But in the top right, Tom, you'll recognize this. There is this sort of ogre-looking thing with a
I
sort
know
of
the
rectangular face,
Yeah.
like embedded in a sort of wall of fur, as it's got a massive fist holding up a skull in between, a human skull in
Yep.
between its fingers. I fucking mapped them out, and this is an army I would happily build and convert at some point in the near future. And I've been sitting on it for years. I have only a few models for them.
Is it the picture I've just put in the references tab? I'll put it on the screen for everyone watching now.
Yes, it's exactly that image. Now, Tom, you may remember that I kit-bashed a few of these.
I do. This was a long time
Long
ago.
time
This
ago,
was at the start of 9th.
It was about 3 or 4 years ago now.
I may have actually seen those on Instagram.
You wouldn't have seen. I did not post
Okay,
them to Instagram.
then it was not yours. I have seen conversions of these float around before.
They're so cool.
They're so cool.
I mapped them out as a faction,
Ooh.
and essentially I wanted them to be one of the like slaver races, because those
Yeah.
are always described in 40k. We always get told about Xenos enslavers, not like enslavers TM, but slave takers that are Xenos, and we rarely get a focus on them besides the Dark Eldar. So my idea for these were that they were just called the Ogux Raiders,
Yeah.
paying homage to them being ogreoid. And I was thinking that they'd be really fun as a very thematically cyberpunk army
Oh.
that rely on slaves.
Oh,
Yep.
And
Oh,
my
it's a
thinking-
combination of chaff and mega elite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So rather than having like transports, they essentially have giant rolling cages. They just let people out in droves. Like horrific shit. They'll have pack hounds. I was actually going to run them as Tyranids, basically. So
Yeah.
the pack hounds and humans are the Gaunts, and they're the warriors. But I was thinking that it would be really cool for their like big standout character to be this absolutely hulking brute lady sitting on a throne that's mounted on a single giant thruster that just hovers off the ground. Like that big Sector Mechanicus like refinery tank,
Yeah.
and just turned into one giant thruster that one of these Ogux are sitting on.
Yeah.
I love it.
That was my whole thing for the army. They'd be mainly infantry with heavy. Like they'd be the Xenos equivalent of Custodes.
Yep.
Is what I'm thinking.
That's fucking sick. I love that.
That's all I've got. You have that, and they're cyberpunk. Loads of cybernetics. Their home societies are very capitalist. They've got a bunch of mega corporations. There,
Lovely.
done.
I get it. I love it. What about you, Alex? You got anything?
Yeah, so I've always been a super big fan of the multiple mentions we've had of the Year of the Ghost, where the entire galaxy fell into darkness and the Year of the Ghost happened.
Yeah.
I love Age of Sigmar Nighthound sculpt. And I love...
Oh, the Nighthaunt, so the literal ghost, the Age of Sigmar ghost models. Yeah.
Give me a ghostly 40k army. Just a sector, maybe the Halo stars, where there's like 5-6 planets, where these ghostly aberrations appear. And sometimes, during very rough periods of time, maybe a darkness, like a Year of the Ghost, falls over the galaxy. And they spread out, coming from the graves from underneath, and coming from around. My original thing would have been Enslavers, but Enslavers would have been one unit and that's it, because there's only one variation.
Yeah.
But something along the lines of Nighthaunt, mixed in with some Guardsman skulls and helmets and things, maybe some Tau skulls and stuff between that would be super cool.
That's sick. No, I love that. I think, for me, it's similar to your answer. So, in general fantasy stuff, I am a huge fan of necromancers, vampires, and zombies. Now, 40k has Nurgle, and 40k has the Necrons. Neither of which scratch that necromantic itch at all for me.
Yeah, there's a severe lack of genuine undead.
Yeah, I would love a slightly heavier necromancer. It could never work because it would step too much on the toes of both of them in reality. But I would love a faction of some variety that was more classic undead. I know that AOS has it with the vampire faction, the I forgot what they're called. Because you literally, your army is just fuckloads of vampires and a fuckload of zombies and skeletons, right?
Soul-Blight Gravelords.
Yeah, they're great. I love them. They're wonderful, even. Red was very gracious, bought me somehow got a hold of the Warhammer Plus exclusive vampire lady from them. It's on my desk right now. It's a wonderful little model. So I'm really big on my vampires and my necromancy, but there's nothing in 40k that really scratches that itch. The Necrons are definitely they're not really come back from the dead because they just don't die, they just return.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, the zombified stuff for Nurgle, it's just not the one. You know, I imagine I could have some crossover with like possession. I don't mean like demon possession, I mean like mind control possession, you know. It's a hard one. It's a hard itch to scratch because I don't know how it would manifest. Would it be some weird Xenos? Would it be some weird like you know how there is the Gene Stealer cults are like a lower level of Tyranid, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if I could have like a whole faction of Nurgle cultists be a whole like sub-level of Nurgle, the Death Guard, and Nurgle demons? You know, maybe that would scratch the itch, but it's so niche, right? I don't think it would ever have a place, but I feel like that's an itch that I would love to be able to scratch, to be honest.
Agreed.
Right, I think that's all our Patron questions. We normally would do 2, but let me take another look at our list and see if anything jumps to me. I don't think so, though. No, that thing never came. The thing that I forgot about earlier never came back to me, by the way. Oh, here's one. I don't know if we've answered this. This is a fun little one. We can answer this in a minute. It's by Zero Shade, and he asked it a while ago. I'm pretty sure we haven't answered this one in a podcast. If we have, we're doing it again. Humanity is fully united and at peace with the Xenos. What hobbies do the Primarchs take on, assuming the Horus Heresy doesn't happen? Well, I think... Oh, God. I think a lot of the Primarchs... We can get through this quite quickly, because a lot of the Primarchs can't live without war.
Yeah.
And all of those ones would continue to go on to start the Horus Heresy, including Horus himself. He said it himself. Horus had said it himself. Horus can't live without war. Yeah. Horus would have had no idea what to do if the heresy ended and humanity was successful. It's why he said, we actually did this on a short the other day. It's why he said
came out today.
Well, at the time of recording, yeah. It's yesterday. It's why he said that Sanguinius should be War Master and not him, because Sanguinius is a leader of war and peace, whereas Horus knows he's a leader of nothing but war. So a lot of the Primarchs would just be fucked. A lot of them would be fucked completely. Guilliman, we know what Guilliman would do, because Guilliman actually said what he would do. But Guilliman would start a farm.
Aww.
Guilliman actually said as much. He'd start a farm. Magnus would be a bookworm. He can live without war. Lorgar could live without war. He would just become fucking.
He's so happy.
He'd be the priest supreme. He'd have a great time. You know. Who else would have a good time?
You might think this might be odd, but I think Perturabo wouldn't go to war.
No, but you're right. Perturabo would do what he always wanted to do, which was become a fucking architect. He would just be playing fucking City Builder Simulator or Sim Cities on a random galaxy.
I was gonna say he'd play Legions Imperialis with Dorn.
Yeah.
And always lose.
What would Dawn do? I think Dawn would just fucking. Honestly think Dawn would just go into some kind of administration job. Just get depression.
You start.
Actually, no. Dawn would just. Actually, Dawn would just adopt a superhuman Ron Swanson persona. I think actually.
He'd start selling cheap copies that he can sell and master the Imperium of a Spain glove.
Yeah.
He'd become a salesman.
Gosh, who else? Who are we missing? Mortarion would suck. Angron would suck. A lot of them would suck. Lehman would suck. Although, actually, Lehman would just be like a perpetual hunting. He would be like...
Yeah.
He would just go back to the wilds of Fenris and just do that.
Yeah, just have some fun there.
He'd be Steve Irwin.
Crikey, look as I try and wrangle this kraken. And he just dies. Yeah.
Oh no! In every reality!
Yeah. Oh, who am I know I'm forgetting someone who would be able to chill out.
Conrad Kurz.
I think
what would he do?
Conrad Kurz would be put down. I honestly think that Fulgrim would be fine as well. Fulgrim would just go into fashion, presumably.
Ferrus Manus would just keep making things. He'd keep taking them away.
Ferrus Manus was actually interesting because we don't know what Ferrus Manus would do, but I can't remember which book it was, but he made a point of saying that he would. He was waiting for the day he could teach his sons to embrace peace, or something along those lines.
I think that might have been in Wrath of Iron, because it's where he talks about teaching them to wean off of their cybernetics.
Yeah,
and not use them as a crutch.
And that's a really interesting one, especially for a Primarch who is like the embodiment of the belief of the survival of the fittest, and strength. It's a very strange one, but I suppose that's because it's a bit telling about that belief, because that's a belief born of necessity, right? And then, so for him, one must then surmise, if there is no necessity, then the necessity is to be peaceful, and therefore that is his new programming. He's just a man of necessity. I like that. I like that a lot. Who else am I forgetting? The Lion. Oh, that's an interesting one. What would the Lion do without war? He might be one of the ones who's fucked, to be fair. I don't think the Lion could live without war.
I don't know. No, that man would probably just go on like, all right, I'm gonna take whatever is left of all like the evil weaponry I have, and I'm just gonna go like outside the galaxy and find some more trouble.
Yeah, him and Lehman would fuck off together actually, somehow in a weird roundabout way. They'd fuck off together.
Oh, they would.
100%.
What Primarchs are we forgetting? I'm getting a Primarch list up. I feel like I'm forgetting a bunch.
Poor Angron.
Angron would be fucked. Angron gets put down. Sanguinius, it would be fine. Yeah, Sanguinius would actually be like 100% at whatever the Emperor's doing. Sanguinius would just be right at his side throughout the entire thing.
What about Alpharis and Omegon? What would they do?
I think the point is we're not meant to know. We're not meant to even guess. I think Jagatai would join the Lion and Fulgrim, not the Lion and Fulgrim, Lion and Lehman on their excursion into the unknown. He'd definitely go with them. Actually, maybe not. The Khan pre-Emperor. The Khan was he was a conqueror, but he was also a man of his people. So maybe not. Maybe he'd adapt. I think like Dawn.
Yeah.
Who else have we got?
I think Korax would run around and try to root out corruption in imperial governments.
I don't think he'd. I don't think he'd be fine. I think he'd be one of the ones who's fucked. He was raised by rebels. Yeah, he is programmed to want to destroy the ruling thing. I think he'd fucking fall into that trope again, and he'd end up with Horus and that lot.
Yeah.
I'll tell you who we haven't mentioned. We haven't mentioned Mortarion. He gets fucked because he just gets put down. Probably for the best.
It's too stinky.
And Vulcan. Vulcan is just actually loving life. Vulcan is digging it. Vulcan is having a great time, honestly. I don't know what hobby he's taken up.
Like we said in the blunt rotation, he's standing outside making a massive barbecue, and it's gonna be great.
Oh, he's just barbecue.
He's just barbecuing.
He's full-time barbecue man. Yeah, that could work. That could work. I mean, Vulcan. It's funny because we said that Ferris would build things. I think Vulcan would build things.
Yeah, 100%.
I think Vulcan would 100% Vulcan would turn Nocturne into like a fucking utopia, given half the chance. And yeah, we'll go back to Mortarion. We didn't really give a proper answer for Mortarion. I was just taking the piss.
He'd have a shower finally.
He'd finally have a shower, yeah. I think Mortarion, in a weird way, would... This is going to sound dumb. Mortarion may even go off with Lehman and the Lion into the nothingness, just because... Except he wouldn't go with them. He'd go off into the nothingness in the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only one who's truly fucked... It's actually quite fun. I think the only ones who are truly fucked are Angron and Horus. I think the rest would actually come with something to do, but I think Angron and Horus... I mean, Angron's obviously... But Horus is quite sad, because Horus just can't live without war. And the rest of them, to different degrees, can. Because it's like, a lot of them, like, the Lion and Lehman are war, superhuman warrior generals, right? But they're also hunters. And they can be hunters. Horus isn't a hunter. He's a bloody warlord, first and foremost. A charismatic warlord, but a warlord nonetheless.
Yeah.
Fuck knows what Alpharis Nomagon would do. I don't even want to think about that. I'm not going to think about that. Sorry, Oba. I'm not answering that one.
They'd play diplomacy.
Yeah.
Good cop and bad cop as they're talking to every single person in the Imperium.
Nah, one of them's playing.
Oh
fucking...
no! They did start a prank YouTube channel.
That's funny. We were talking about that during the fucking last episode. We talked about them. Nah, one of them would just spend the next 10,000 years playing Civ, and the other would be playing Stellaris. And that'd be that. Yeah, I think that's about right. Right, I think that about wraps it up, ladies and gents. So, thank you all so much for watching. I've really wanted to do this episode for a while. It's kind of hard to do the Homebrew one, because it's all about lining up the right people at the right time and having a measured response to it. If we, or I, have said anything that was a bit too heavy-handed, just remember... if you've gotten this far, just remember with homebrewing, it's all about what makes you happy. Yeah. Like with anything you do, as long as you're not hurting anyone, like with anything you do, your first and foremost priority should be your own personal happiness. And it's the same with everything. This hobby is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to bring people happiness and entertainment. And I think it's hard to be hypercritical of homebrewing and say all the things that I've said and say all the things that we've said without also saying that if you do any homebrewing and it makes you happy, feel free to just ignore everyone else. Just enjoy it. And definitely kit bashing before law.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Kit bashing before law. It's the best thing you can do. I'm a kit basher before I'm a homebrewer, and I love homebrewing. And I love kit bashing, making my fucking Deathwatch RPG character at the moment. I'm having a great time. I'm having a really great time.
And all that besides, just if you can actually abide by all the stuff we discussed, and if you actually manage to make something that satisfies all of that, you're kind of doing a better job than GW. 'Cause I don't think I've read a single GW thing that doesn't fall into one of these pitfalls. It's not something that you need to stick by. Just be aware of it.
No, that's right. No, that's right. And there's 20 things, right? But as we found out when we got to the relic technology stuff, even I'm tripping up with that one. I put it on the list, not realizing I'm tripping up with that one. Just be liberal with it. Be free with it. Enjoy yourself. Just chill the fuck out.
We say after 3 hours.
Yeah, we say, hey, listen, we say it at the start, we say it at the end, we dot it in a few times in between. It's that simple,
Just about having fun.
I know some of you are about to comment, Tom, what about the homebrew review? Don't worry, I'm working on it. Shut up. It's coming. Like the second coming of Christ, it's on the way. But yeah, just, when you're homebrewing, just enjoy yourself. Honestly, don't stress. Have a good time. If you become like me, and you care about the nuance, you care about the intricacies and the law compliance, then this video is for you. If you don't worry about it. If you didn't care about what we were saying and you've somehow made it this far, then
Thank you.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Well, that one guy.
Congrats.
That one guy we were talking about earlier, that one guy who's hating on the podcast, but he watches it all anyway. That guy's great. You know, kudos to that guy, man. He's probably listening to this now. He's like, oh, I hate them so much. Why can't they take things seriously? It's like, but I still watch them all anyway. Thanks for the view, man. You've made us at least some money, I guess.
That's incredible watch retention.
Yeah. I'll tell you what it is. It's a discipline thing. He's disciplining himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, it's like
Rage
like
edging?
those people who get up rage edging. You know, it's like those people they get up at 5 a.m. every morning and then sit in an ice bath for 5 minutes. This guy, he just listens to the AM podcast. It's the same thing, basically. He's having a great time. Love that guy. Love you, dude. I've forgotten your name, but you keep it up, G.
I appreciate
I
you.
believe in you.
We do this for you. We did this
Just
entirely
for
for
you.
you.
I'm glad we could help. Right. I think we're done. I think we're finished.
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Take a look at the Patron. Subscribe to the Gaming Storyteller.
Hell
or
yeah.
unsubscribe from the Gaming Storyteller.
No. Stay, please.
His channel's linked down below. Zarrek, when the fuck are you making a YouTube channel?
I'll make it now if you want.
If you make it now, I'll put a link in the bottom. There'll be a link to a
Yeah.
YouTube channel with like 0 subscribers.
Guys, I'll make it now.
Get
There'll
him
be a
to
link
it.
YouTube channel.
Come on, get him to 1,000 subs.
I'll do it. I'll make it now.
There you go. There'll be a link to a YouTube channel down below. It's got no subs. The first person to subscribe gets the picture of Zarrek's shelf.
Yes, I'll actually send you that if you subscribe. I'll post a single video to my channel. It'll just be a photo of the shelf.
There you go.
Just for you.
100%. Yeah. Easy peasy. Right. You take it easy, everyone. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.